Chapter 297. Hui Yan's bull-like eyes stared at Lu Chen for a long while, then slowly put him down. His expression also softened. After a while, he suddenly said, I am only one person, and not even the tribe leader. Even if I make such an oath, it may not necessarily be retribution to the tribe. Lu Chen nodded. Yes, what you said makes sense. Hui Yan looked at him. Then you still want me to make an oath? Lu Chen calmly said, it doesn't matter whether it counts or not. I just want to be at ease. Hui Yan stared at Lu Chen, and Lu Chen stared back at him. Neither of them had any intention of avoiding each other's eyes. After a while, Hui Yan nodded, took 2 steps to the side, and knelt down on one knee facing the vast wasteland. One hand on his chest, the other pointing to the sky, he repeated the oath that Lu Chen had just said. At this moment, Lu Chen's expression finally changed. When he looked at the barbarian Hui Yan again, his gaze became a little more complicated. There was a bit of caution, but also a bit of admiration. At the same time, the last ray of light in the sky finally disappeared. The sky darkened. What do you plan to do next? Lu Chen asked Hui Yan. Hui Yan said, I will bring you to the fire god altar to see if the fire god has any orders. That place is quite far from here, and it is very well hidden. It is also very dangerous. Without me, you will not be able to find it. Lu Chen glanced at him. Just the 2 of us? Hui Yan said, just the 2 of us? Lu Chen pointed at the tribe's camp in the darkness. Are you going to ignore them? Hui Yan was silent for a while. With my father here, the tribe will not fall into chaos. In addition, we have just defeated the mountain spirit tribe, so there will not be any sudden wars in this period of time. Before he finished speaking, a figure suddenly rushed out from the darkness. It was Hui Yan's son, Hui Ying. The young man's face was filled with excitement as he ran in front of Hui Yan, shouting, Father, what are you doing? The muscles on Hui Yan's face twitched slightly. He took a deep breath and said in a low voice, Son, I need to leave the tribe for a period of time. During this period of time, you have to help me lead the tribe. Don't be willful. Why? The fire hawk looked furious and incomprehensible. He pointed at Lu Chen and said, just for this human who suddenly appeared? Father, what's wrong with you today? Why do you seem like a different person all of a sudden? Hui Yan shook his head and said, This is the will of the fire god. Son, everything I do is for our black fire tribe. The fire hawk let out a low roar, but looking at his father's determined expression, he seemed to know that he could no longer persuade him. He could only turn his head and glare fiercely at Lu Chen. If looks could kill, Lu Chen would probably be dead by now. Then, the fire hawk clenched his teeth and ran back with large strides. He seemed extremely disappointed in his father. Lu Chen looked at the back of the young man and suddenly said, Actually, what he said is somewhat reasonable. Anyone would feel that your decision is somewhat unimaginable. Hui Yan silently looked in the direction that the fire hawk disappeared, as well as the blurry shadow of the black fire tribe's camp in the night. After a while, he suddenly threw the fire god's staff to Lu Chen, then turned and walked into the distance. At the same time, he said, Let's go. Lu Chen caught the fire god's staff and turned it around in his hand. The smooth feeling made him feel somewhat familiar and intimate. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He casually leaned against his chest and the fire god's staff instantly disappeared. He then called out to Atsu and quickly followed Hui Yan. As they walked, Hui Yan intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Lu Chen's chest. A strange look flashed in his eyes, but in the end, he didn't say anything. After walking like this for a while, Lu Chen suddenly asked him, There's something I still want to ask you. Hui Yan said, Speak. Lu Chen said, The entire Black Fire tribe doesn't believe me. You're just one person. With your status and identity, why would you take such a great risk and do something so reckless that you almost fell out with your tribe? Hui Yan silently walked forward. After a while, he said in a low voice, They can't see the danger. What danger? The danger of the tribe's extinction. Lu Chen frowned. What do you mean? Hui Yan's face darkened, then he slowly said, ever since the ancestors of the tribe escaped from the north 1,000 years ago, bad luck has been haunting our Black Fire tribe. This is because those ancestors committed a great sin and were punished by the fire god. Lu Chen thought for a moment, then looked at him and asked tentatively, you mean to say, what did the ancestors of the Black Fire tribe do when they escaped from the north? Hui Yan smiled bitterly, then said bitterly, back then, your human cultivator army was too strong. After a bloody battle, the outcome was clear. Back then, the Black Fire tribe was second to none, and was responsible for covering the retreat of the other tribes as they fled south. But at the most critical moment, our ancestors abandoned the shamans, priests, and warriors who were engaged in a fierce battle. They crossed the Great Snow Mountain and the Broken Spirit Sand Sea and ran back to the wilderness. Lu Chen was startled, then seemed to think of something. Later, your powerful ancestors didn't come back? Hui Yan sighed and said, later on, the war became extremely intense. Your human race had unrivaled masters who fought, causing the mountains to collapse and the earth to crack, the terrain to change. The only path was also sealed. After that, those people were never able to return. Lu Chen was speechless. After a moment of silence, Hui Yan's tone seemed to have calmed down. Soon after, he said, from then on, our Black Fire tribe suffered a disastrous decline, becoming a small and weak tribe in the wastelands. Until now, we can only mingle with small tribes like the Ghost Eye and Thunder Lizard. But even so, after a long time, the people in our tribe gradually got used to it. They felt that there was nothing wrong with continuing like this. Lu Chen said, but you don't think so? Hui Yan shook his head. Living like this, there is no vitality and no hope. Even if we can continue to live for decades or even centuries, there will be a day when an accident, a storm, a defeat in a battle, is enough to make our Black Fire tribe disappear. He stopped and turned to look at Lu Chen. They can't see it, but I saw it. Originally, I was at my wit's end. But I happened to meet you. No matter what, I have to take a gamble. The Black Fire tribe is too weak. Only by having a priest in the tribe can we have hope to rise again in this harsh wilderness. Even if... Lu Chen said lightly, even if that priest is a human? Hui Yan was silent for a moment. His cheeks twitched as if he was gritting his teeth. Then he said in a low voice, yes. Lu Chen nodded. After taking a few steps forward, he suddenly asked, then have you ever thought that maybe the others in the Black Fire tribe are not wrong, and you are the only one in the wrong? Hui Yan strode forward, facing the boundless night. As the cold wind blew past, his tall and burly body showed no intention of retreating. He walked forward proudly and said loudly, then I've lost. That's fine. I'll compensate you with my life. Just think of it as me dying for the Black Fire tribe. Lu Chen looked at his back and suddenly sighed. He nodded and said to himself in a low voice, what a good man. I didn't expect there to be such a resolute person in the barbarian tribe. Amazing. Hui Yan led Lu Chen into the depths of the wilderness for a day and a night. Apart from resting and sleeping in between, he had been walking forward the entire time. Later, Lu Chen couldn't help but feel curious. He asked, isn't the fire god altar the sacred land of the Black Fire tribe? Why didn't you guys guard the sacred land nearby? Hui Yan shook his head. That won't do. Firstly, the sacred land of the fire god altar is different. It's not suitable for ordinary people to live near it. Secondly, living too close would easily attract the attention of other tribes, which would endanger the safety of the sacred land. Lu Chen raised his eyebrows. Other tribes also know about the fire god altar, so they want to spy on you? Hui Yan nodded and said, back then, our tribe was the largest tribe in the wasteland after all. Therefore, many people thought that there might be many treasures in our sacred altar. After the north and south were completely isolated, many people from the tribe tried to coerce and bribe us for this secret, but we rejected all of them. They didn't use any tricks. Of course they did. Hui Yan said indifferently. Kidnapping, murder, interrogation, war. Our Black Fire tribe has experienced it all. Otherwise, our strength wouldn't have declined so quickly. Later on, they used all kinds of methods, but they still didn't get any news. Therefore, this matter gradually faded. They probably thought that the fire god altar was just a legend. Lu Chen wanted to say something but stopped. He felt an inexplicable pressure on his body. Such an important secret had been kept by the Black Fire tribe for so many years. It had only been passed down from generation to generation by word of mouth. But now, Hui Yan was bringing him there just like that. Part of this was because of the so-called fire god. Carrying a fire god staff was too attractive. But Hui Yan, this barbarian's decisiveness, once again made Lu Chen exclaim in his heart. He raised his head to look at Hui Yan. He thought to himself, this barbarian is probably the most gambler and craziest of all the barbarians in all these years. Just like that, they walked for 2 days, but they still hadn't reached the place that Hui Yan had mentioned. However, on the second day, when they were walking on the desolate wasteland, a gust of yellow sand and dust suddenly blew towards them. Then, there was a shrill whistling sound, as if someone was howling towards the sky, and also as if there was a magnificent army floating over from the depths of the wasteland in front of them. Chapter 298. Hui Yan's expression suddenly changed, looking somewhat nervous. He quickly laid down on the ground and stuck his ear to the ground to listen for a while. His expression immediately became ugly. Lu Chen also frowned and asked, "What, is there trouble?" Hui Yan nodded and said, "It could be a pack of wolves." There were packs of wolves in the wasteland, and these wolves were not ordinary wolves. They were all powerful demonic wolves that had advanced to the next rank. They often formed packs of 10 and wreaked havoc in the wasteland. Apart from not daring to attack the tribal camps or the barbarian settlements, there was almost nothing in the wasteland that the demonic wolves did not dare to attack. Wolf packs ate everything they could eat, wild beasts, demonic beasts, and even lone or small numbers of barbarian people. Demonic wolves were extremely powerful, fierce and agile. That was why a few dozen demonic wolves could run with the might of a magnificent army. It was extremely shocking. But Hui Yan's expression was ugly as he looked at the yellow sand in front of him. He anxiously asked with a trace of doubt, shouldn't these wolves live near the plains in the south? Why would they come to the desert? Although a few dozen ferocious and powerful demon wolves gathered together had terrifying battle strength, they also needed a lot of food every day. Therefore, in this extremely barren and desolate area near the northern border, it was actually impossible to raise too many demon wolves. Most of the wolf pack's activity area was further south. In the past, Hui Yan had walked along this route to the fire god altar, but he had never met a wolf pack, except this time. Damn! What is going on? Hui Yan cursed angrily. Lu Chen was still relatively calm. He said to him, "If this wolf pack is really so strong, why don't we first run a distance and avoid them?" Hui Yan smiled bitterly and shook his head. His gaze was looking around, as if he was looking for something. At the same time, he said, "It's useless. The wolf pack's sense of smell is extremely sharp. As long as we are targeted by them, we cannot escape unless there is a large river nearby." Other than yellow sand, there was only dry sand nearby. Of course, there would not be a large river like the Dragon River. Lu Chen thought for a while and said to Hui Yan, "I think we can run." Hui Yan was startled and turned to look at him. Lu Chen patted Atsu's back and said very calmly, "This black wolf of mine is especially good at escaping. Whether it's speed or endurance, it's definitely better than those demonic beasts, so I should be able to escape if I want to. But as for you..." He paused for a moment, sizing up Hui Yan, and then said with sincerity, "You are so tall and burly, and your footsteps are so loud, I don't need to ask to know how heavy you are. I can't bring you along to escape, or else we will die together." Hui Yan was speechless. He looked at Lu Chen, and after a while, he said, "Have you always been this straightforward with your words?" "Not really. I only do this when I'm in a life and death situation. Alright, the two of them stood side by side, looking at the vast wasteland and the yellow sand that was being kicked up, listening to the soul-stirring sound that was getting closer and closer. Then, they looked at each other. Hui Yan frowned and said, "Why aren't you running?" Lu Chen said, "I feel that Atsu can bring me along and escape, but seeing how calm you are, I really want to see just how you will escape." Hui Yan was silent for a moment, and said, "I have no choice." Lu Chen raised his eyebrows and said, "Oh, so you are waiting for death here?" Hui Yan sighed, but there was no fear on his face. Instead, a trace of helplessness appeared on his face as he said, "This is the will of the heavens, there is nothing I can do." Lu Chen clicked his tongue twice, and said while shaking his head, "Looking at you before, you have a great breadth of mind and spirit. You should be a rare heroic figure in the brute tribe. Logically speaking, this kind of matter shouldn't be too difficult for you." Hui Yan snorted and said, "Thank you for thinking so highly of me, but it's a pity that I have ambition, but the fire god doesn't take pity on me. I am fated to die here. Heart higher than the sky, life thinner than paper." Lu Chen couldn't help but think of an old saying passed down from the human race. Although it was a little strange to use it on this fierce brute, the meaning was more or less the same. He shook his head and sighed, then looked at the yellow sand that was getting closer and closer. The mournful howls seemed to be right next to his ears. "Is there really no other way?" Lu Chen asked. "Yes." Hui Yan responded, and said, "Looks like it's about time, you should go. I am a black fire warrior after all, I have to fight before I die." As he said that, he slowly pulled out the giant axe that he was wearing. "Even if you give up, in the future when I return to the north, my only hope is still on you." Lu Chen said, "Since you are going to die anyway, why don't you tell me that secret before you die?" Hui Yan shook his head and said, "No." Lu Chen spread out his hands and said, "Why is that? Do you want to keep this matter to yourself even if you have to die?" Hui Yan said seriously, "That day, I solemnly swore to the fire god that if you can't help the black fire tribe rise to power, I can't tell you." Lu Chen rolled his eyes and said, "Then I promise you, as long as you tell me, I will definitely do it, okay?" Still no. Damn. Lu Chen couldn't help but curse, and said, "Why is that?" Hui Yan said, "After I die, the black fire tribe will never accept you. Even if they are exterminated, they will not let you become the tribe's priest. So, your promise is meaningless, it's just a bunch of nonsense." Lu Chen glared at this barbarian who was about to die but still had a surprisingly good brain. His face was full of anger. A faint smile appeared on Hui Yan's originally ferocious face, and he even appeared somewhat relaxed. He even extended his hand and gently patted Lu Chen's shoulder. After which, he said, "Although I do not wish to die in this place for no reason, it is actually very interesting to think that I am able to get to know a human like you before I die. It's a pity that I will not be able to accomplish such great things with you in the future." Ha ha ha, as he laughed, the fierce and mighty berserker looked as if he had already seen through life and death. Not only did he not run away with the great axe in his hand, he started to walk forward instead. After a while, Lu Chen's somewhat annoyed voice suddenly came from behind him. There was even a faint trace of frustration in his voice as he complained, "I didn't think that I wouldn't suffer a loss in front of that damn baldy, but today I actually suffered in front of a barbarian fool like you." Hui Yan's footsteps paused for a moment. He probably didn't understand what it meant to lose in front of a barbarian. But very quickly, he heard Lu Chen say, "Hey, come back, I have a way to save you." Hui Yan's eyes lit up. With a "hoo" sound, he put away his great axe and jumped back. He anxiously asked Lu Chen, "What way?" The big man suddenly rushed over with an imposing aura, causing Lu Chen to jump in fright. He couldn't help but say, "I say, didn't you look as if you had seen through life and death just now?" Hui Yan spat and said, "Only an idiot would want to die. Didn't I have no other way?" As he spoke, he grinned and stared at Lu Chen as he said, quickly tell me how to save me." Afterwards, he glanced at Atsu and said to himself, "Could it be that your accompanying demonic beast is really gifted?" It can actually carry the two of us and escape. Of course not. Lu Chen sneered, then said seriously, this is an absolute secret of mine. I can't easily reveal it to others. If it wasn't for you being so tight-lipped, and that this secret can only be known from you, I definitely wouldn't let you know. How about this, make another vow that you will never reveal this secret of mine, even to those closest to you. Hui Yan looked at him deeply and nodded. Then, just like before, he solemnly swore an oath to the fire god. Even the retribution of the oath was the same as before. Smoke and dust soared into the sky. The endless yellow sand was already rushing towards them, and the stench of blood was already faintly discernible. Lu Chen said, "You are really decisive. You said you would make an oath, and you did it without the slightest bit of hesitation." Hui Yan pointed at the yellow sand that was already in front of them and said, "Escaping is more important. If we don't do it quickly, we have no choice." Ho! A long howl came from the yellow sand, and a huge black shadow faintly appeared. It looked like a giant wolf. Its entire body was black and gray, and it was about the same size as the Atsu. The only difference was that the Atsu's fur was pure black, and not messy like the other wolf demons. Lu Chen snorted and called for the Atsu to come closer. Then, he stretched out his hand and pulled Hui Yan. In just a few moments, there were already no less than 10 giant wolves in the rolling yellow sand. They all roared fiercely and rushed over, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. It was a terrifying sight. At the same time, a white light suddenly lit up. After a flash in the yellow sand, the two figures and the Atsu's body suddenly disappeared at the same time. All of the giant wolves pounced on empty air, and a few of them even fiercely collided with each other. For a moment, the sound of crashing could be heard. The pack of wolves angrily roared, and their sharp fangs frantically searched the surroundings. But everything disappeared as if it was an illusion, as if the two people and one wolf had never existed. Only in an inconspicuous corner of the yellow sand, on the ground, a small seed was covered by the rolling dust, rolling about in the terrifying claws of the pack of wolves, and then buried even deeper into the sand, never to be seen again. Needless to say, Lu Chen, Hui Yan, and the Atsu all hid in the mysterious ancient tree hole. After the white light flashed in the silent tree hole, their bodies suddenly fell to the ground. Then, Hui Yan was the first to jump up, holding the giant axe in his hand tightly. His eyes revealed a trace of vigilance as he looked around. "Don't worry, there's no danger here." Lu Chen's somewhat unhappy voice came from behind him. Different from Hui Yan, Lu Chen and the Atsu had already adapted to the situation here. At this moment, they were lazily sitting up. Hui Yan looked around again, and after confirming that there was nothing dangerous, he let out a sigh of relief. He grinned and looked towards Lu Chen. Just as he was about to open his mouth to speak, his expression abruptly changed. Before he could even utter a single word, his eyes suddenly rolled back into his head, and he actually directly fell to the ground. With a bang, he seemed to have fallen unconscious. Chapter 299. Lu Chen and Atsu, who were about to stand up in a relaxed manner, suddenly froze at the same time. They watched in shock as Hui Yan's huge body crashed down like a collapsing mountain, heavily smashing into the ground with a dull thud. This sound was painful to listen to. If there were any more crisp cracking sounds, Lu Chen would have thought that Hui Yan had probably broken his own bones. The man and dog were stunned on the ground for a moment, then they looked at each other. Atsu also seemed to be very confused. He looked at Hui Yan, then looked at Lu Chen, then suddenly jumped up, his tail wagging wildly, and barked a few times at Lu Chen, actually revealing a look of flattery. Lu Chen spat and pushed away the big dog head that had come up to him. He angrily scolded, "Are you stupid? How could it be me?" After saying that, he hurriedly went forward to check on Hui Yan's condition. Atsu seemed to have let bygones be bygones, and seemed to be in a good mood. He followed beside Lu Chen, sticking his head out to look at Hui Yan. From time to time, he would use his nose to sniff the barbarian's body a few times. After a brief inspection, Lu Chen discovered that there were no bleeding wounds on Huiyan's body. Of course, there were no signs of any broken bones. It seemed that everything was fine. But this barbarian warrior, who was as strong as a bull, was currently inexplicably unconscious. At the same time, his chest was heaving up and down rapidly, his breathing was also rapid. His eyes had turned white, and his cheeks were swollen red. He looked like a fish that had been thrown onto the shore, or a monster that had strangled his throat and made him unable to breathe. He looked like he was in extreme pain. Lu Chen was also momentarily stunned and at a loss for what to do. He and Tu had entered this place without any problems, but only Huiyan had encountered such a strange thing. Even if he wanted to save him, he didn't know where to start. Lu Chen furrowed his brows and tried to get Huiyan to lie flat, or help him turn over. However, these simple movements were obviously of no help to this barbarian who had suddenly fallen into a painful coma. Huiyan was still unconscious, and as time passed, his appearance became worse and worse. His cheeks were getting redder and redder, and his breathing was getting weaker. At the same time, his eyes were showing signs of bulging out. Upon seeing Huiyan's current state, Lu Chen could not help but feel his scalp turn numb. If this strange state continued, he subconsciously felt that something extremely terrifying and horrifying would most likely happen to this barbarian. But how was she going to save him? Immediately pulling Huiyan away from this mysterious tree hole was naturally the simplest and fastest method. However, the outside of the tree hole was likely surrounded by a large pack of incomparably ferocious demonic wolves. They were fuming with rage, and were furiously roaring as they dug 3 feet into the ground in order to find their missing prey. Once they left, only death would await them. Moreover, if he wanted Huiyan to leave this place, Lu Chen himself would have to leave as well. In other words, Lu Chen would have to risk his life to help Huiyan leave this place. Although Lu Chen felt that this barbarian Huiyan was quite pleasing to the eye, he could forget about paying such a huge price. However, other than this cave was only so big. Other than the few things that he had thrown here, there was nothing else. In fact, Lu Chen did not even know what had caused Huiyan to suddenly become like this, let alone find a way to save him. He stood up, and glanced at his surroundings in annoyance. Everywhere was the same. The ground, the tree walls, the hazy green chi, and at most, the 2 doorways that were faintly discernible embedded in the tree walls. Everything was the same as usual, but just what was it that caused Huiyan to become so unaccustomed to this place the moment he entered? The only exit could not be exited, and there were similarly no other paths to take in this tree hole. Huiyan's situation was getting worse and worse. In the blink of an eye, his cheeks were so red that it seemed as if blood was about to drip out. The bulges in his eyes grew larger and larger, as if something was about to explode in his body. It was truly a terrifying sight. In this anxious moment, Lu Chen recalled that before Huiyan had entered this ancient tree hole, other than himself and Atsu, there was actually another person who had come here. White Lotus. Thinking of this, Lu Chen suddenly fell into deep thought. That day when White Lotus had entered here, she seemed to have encountered an accident. When she had entered, she had also fallen unconscious. However, what was different from Huiyan was that she did not experience any difficulty in breathing, nor did her eyeballs bulge out of her body. Lu Chen was even more at a loss for a moment. Looking at the surroundings of the tree hole again, he felt that this tree hole that was originally very familiar to him had suddenly become a little strange. It was a little more sinister and scary, but he just couldn't tell what was strange about it. Why was he the only one who had entered without any problems? What was the problem? Lu Chen forcefully shook his head, throwing away the messy and distracting thoughts in his mind. At this moment, the most important thing was to think of a way to save Huiyan's life. Otherwise, if this barbarian died, his only hope of returning to the north would most likely be lost. But, how was he going to save him? There was no way to leave, and there were no elixirs or elixirs. Looking at Huiyan's current situation, it was obvious that the blood and qi in his body were under some kind of pressure. It was stimulated to the extreme and looked like it was about to explode. His expression was already extremely ugly, and 2 thin streaks of blood had already flowed down from his bulging eye sockets. Lu Chen did not doubt that if he still did not think of a way, this barbarian would very likely explode in front of him in a short while. That scene, just thinking about it, was extremely frightening. Lu Chen's forehead was also dripping with cold sweat. However, the situation in front of him seemed to be a dead end. There was no way out at all. Just as he was feeling extremely anxious, he saw that the black dog beside him did not seem to be interested in this tense atmosphere. At first, it would still curiously sniff Hui Yan, but very quickly, it walked away. At this time, it walked to the puddle in the tree hole, lying there and looking into the water. It seemed that the water there was much more interesting than this. Water. All of a sudden, Lu Chen's body trembled violently. Everything in this huge ancient tree hole was exactly the same. The only thing that was different was the puddle in the middle of the tree hole. This thought flashed through Lu Chen's mind like a spark. He suddenly looked back and saw that Hui Yan's situation had reached the most critical point, and he was in danger of exploding at any time. At this time, he could not care so much. With a light shout, he directly grabbed Hui Yan's body and dragged him forward, all the way to the puddle. Atsu, who was originally lying on the edge of the water and looking at its own reflection, jumped up in shock. Before it could even react, it heard a whoosh and a black shadow flashed past in front of it. A moment later, Hui Yan's huge body was directly thrown into the puddle by Lu Chen. Dong! With a loud bang, water splashed all over the place, splashing all over Atsu, who was caught off guard, and splashed all over his body. Atsu screamed and took 2 steps back. Then, it bared its teeth and barked at Hui Yan in the puddle, looking very angry. As for Lu Chen, he had jumped away in advance and was not splashed much by the water. However, he was more concerned about Hui Yan's situation. After the water splashed, he quickly leaned forward again, wanting to see if this barbarian would be better in the water. Actually, Lu Chen did not have much confidence in his own ability. Right now, it was just a desperate attempt. If this method did not work, then Hui Yan could only blame himself for being unlucky. The water in the puddle trembled violently, swaying non-stop. Hui Yan's body was bobbing up and down in the water, but there were no signs of him waking up. Lu Chen's heart sank slightly. Could it be that the heavens want you dead? Atsu, who was at the side, came over curiously. It leaned against Lu Chen's side and looked. Seeing that Hui Yan did not move for a long time, it snorted and began to shake its body to get rid of the water droplets on its body. For a moment, the sound of water splashing could be heard, and the water droplets splashed everywhere, splashing all over Lu Chen's body. Lu Chen cursed and pushed the stupid dog away. At this moment, he did not have the mood to argue with it. He was still carefully watching Hui Yan in the water. After a while, his eyes suddenly lit up, and he let out a sound of surprise. He saw that Hui Yan's entire body was submerged in the water. Although he was still unconscious, he did not know why, but the red color on his face was slowly receding. His pair of scary bulging eyes were also slowly calming down, gradually returning to normal. This puddle was actually effective. For a moment, Lu Chen did not know what to say. After a while, he laughed and let out a long breath. He then stood up and said indifferently, "Consider yourself lucky." Without a doubt, this puddle was the most miraculous thing in this mysterious ancient tree hole. In the past, when Lu Chen was tormented by the evil curse of burning his body and soul, he had also hidden in this place to struggle at death's door. After 10 years, he had finally broken free from the frightening black flame curse, but at the same time, he had used up all the life essence in this puddle. Today, the water in this puddle was no different from an ordinary puddle. But today, it seemed to have saved Hui Yan's life. Even though Lu Chen did not understand the reason behind this. He waited for a while by the side of the puddle. After seeing that Hui Yan's condition had mostly returned to normal, he picked up Hui Yan's head and placed it at the side, slightly away from the water. This was to prevent Hui Yan from suffocating to death if he stayed underwater for a long time. During this time, he was extremely careful, afraid that something would happen if Hui Yan showed his head. If that was the case, then he really could not do anything. But fortunately, it seemed that Huiyan, whose body was mostly submerged in the water, was no longer in that strange situation and had returned to normal. However, just like White Lotus, he was still unconscious. After placing Huiyan down, Lu Chen walked to the side and sat down next to Atsu. Atsu raised its head and looked at him. Lu Chen also smiled at it. Then, he frowned slightly and said to Atsu in a soft voice, "Atsu, do you also feel that it's strange? Why is it like this? What is it that the two of us have that they don't?" Chapter 300. The food that was originally stored in this mysterious tree hole had been depleted when they fell into the Longchuan. After they came out, they were already in the southern wilderness. These days, because the places they passed by were very barren, Lu Chen did not replenish anything. As a result, Lu Chen and Atsu could not stay here for too long. Fortunately, the wolves would not understand the reason for their sudden disappearance, so they would not stay around the seed for too long. But no matter what, it was better to wait a little longer. It would probably be safer. Lu Chen thought to himself. For the past 10 years, he had tried his best to hide the secret of this seed and there had not been any accidents. But after he got close to the chaotic lands, especially during this period of time, things happened one after another. The last time he fell into the Longchuan, this time he was forced by the wolves. He was almost in a state where he could not control the dangers of the outside world. This was a very disgusting feeling for Lu Chen. He thought to himself that he should avoid this kind of thing as much as possible in the future. Waiting was a dull and boring thing, especially in this mysterious tree hole that was not too big. There was nowhere to go and nowhere to look. It was very stressful. If an ordinary person came here, they would probably feel the passage of time become blurred. But Lu Chen had already gotten used to the atmosphere here after so many years, so he did not feel anything strange. As for Atsu, even though this dog had advanced to become a holy beast, it still looked as carefree as before. As long as there was food to eat, it would not care about anything. In any case, it just ate and slept, and ate again when it woke up. Occasionally, it would play with Lu Chen. But the terrible thing was that there was no food here. So, although Atsu seemed to be in a normal mood, no one knew what would happen when it was hungry. When Lu Chen thought of this, he could not help but look suspiciously at the black dog lying beside him. He muttered, "You stupid dog, when you're really hungry, you won't go crazy and eat me, will you?" It was unknown whether Atsu heard Lu Chen's words clearly. It lay on the ground and yawned loudly, looking a little sleepy. Lu Chen glared at it, then casually picked up the Vulcan staff that had been thrown to the side. Although he had not activated the spiritual power of the black flames and the Vulcan staff did not shine, the strange and twisted totem runes on the staff could still be clearly seen. It should represent another power that was completely different from the human cultivation world of the divine central continent. Many years ago, this power had suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of the human race, and to this day, most human cultivators despised the barbarians. But Lu Chen had personally experienced the power of the black flames, and was also one of the few people who had seen the power of the southern border barbarians. From the bottom of his heart, he was actually in awe of this power. He stroked the fire god's staff and pondered silently. At a certain moment, he suddenly thought of the fire shaman he met 10 years ago. That old shaman had given him 10 years of painful experiences that were worse than death. Until death, it was difficult for Lu Chen to forget him. But there was no doubt that the fire shaman was unusually powerful. But why did he not bring the Vulcan staff with him in the Battle of the Barren Valley? Wasn't the Vulcan staff the artifact of the Black Fire tribe? Why did the fire shaman not bring such an important thing at such an important moment? Instead, more than 10 years after his death, Lu Chen accidentally found this thing in a small tribe that had already been weakened to the extreme. Was it because the fire shaman was too confident in his power and did not bring it with him? Or was it because the Vulcan staff was too important and did not want to take the risk of bringing it out of the tribe? Or did he simply feel that it was not safe for him to lead the elites away from the tribe, so he left the artifact behind to protect the tribe? Lu Chen pondered for a long time, his gaze sweeping over the unconscious Hui Yan who was soaking in the water. He felt that there were too many mysteries surrounding the past events of the disorienting lands. The Black Fire Barbarian tribe also seemed to be unfathomable, and he did not know what their relationship was with the fire god that he did not know was real or fake. If it was really as Hui Yan said, that the entire Black Fire tribe worshipped the fire god, then with the identity, status, and power of the fire shaman, why did he abandon the fire god and instead join forces with the demon cult of the human race? All these things were like scattered pearls, but on his way to the southern wilderness this time, he seemed to vaguely feel that there was an invisible thread slowly linking everything together. The truth hidden behind the layer of fog seemed to be vaguely revealed. Lu Chen waited for a long time until Atsu began to faintly become restless and looked around for food. Only then did he stand up. There was no change in Hui Yan who was soaking in the water, and he still looked unconscious. Lu Chen walked over to check his breathing, and then checked his physical condition. Indeed, there was no change. "Let's go, we're going out." Lu Chen turned and called Atsu over. He then shrugged and said, "I hope our luck isn't too bad." Boom. A light flashed, and 3 figures appeared out of thin air, then fell to the ground. After the initial wave of dizziness, Lu Chen quickly recovered and then turned over and jumped up. But he only felt the surrounding sand and soil swarming over him. In the chaos, he couldn't see his surroundings clearly. Lu Chen was still shocked. He thought to himself, did this seed fall into some kind of underground sand pit? Fortunately, after a while, the surrounding sand and soil stopped falling. Even so, 2 people and a dog were still covered in dust, looking particularly embarrassed. When the smoke and dust gradually settled, Lu Chen discovered that the 3 of them were knee-deep in a sand pit. There was no trace of the terrifying wolf pack in the surroundings. Lu Chen breathed a sigh of relief. He looked around and found that the place was somewhat familiar. It seemed to be the place where the wolf pack had caught up to them. It seemed that during this period of time, no one had discovered the secret of this seed, so no one noticed it when it fell to the ground. He hurriedly pulled Hui Yan up. Now that they were out of the tree hole, Hui Yan seemed to have returned to normal. There was no longer any protruding eyes or boiling blood. After about the time to drink a cup of tea, Hui Yan suddenly let out a long, low groan, and then slowly woke up. Lu Chen stood to the side and looked at him. He saw that Hui Yan's expression was somewhat dazed, as if he hadn't completely woken up. After a while, Hui Yan turned his head and looked at Lu Chen. His eyes went from scattered to focused, and after staring at him for a while, Hui Yan suddenly opened his mouth and said with some surprise, "Where are we now?" "Still in the same place." Lu Chen said, "But don't worry, the wolf pack has already left." Hui Yan nodded, and his expression seemed to have relaxed a little. It was obvious that he, as a barbarian, was much more afraid of the wolf pack than Lu Chen. He stood up and patted the dust off his body. He let out a long sigh, and there was some joy on his face. No matter what, being able to escape was always a good thing. After tidying up, Lu Chen felt his trousers being dragged a few times. He looked down and saw that it was Atsu coming over and biting him. He couldn't help but laugh and nodded, "Got it, we'll go find something to eat." Atsu was instantly happy. Hui Yan, who was at the side, was startled. He looked at Lu Chen and said, "How long have we been here?" Lu Chen thought for a while and said, "I'm not sure, but it should be a long time." Hui Yan nodded, and looked up to identify the direction. He then pointed in a direction and said to Lu Chen, "Let's go that way." Lu Chen agreed and followed with Atsu. After walking for a while, he heard Hui Yan suddenly say, "Lu Chen, don't you have anything to say to me?" Lu Chen said, "What do you want to hear?" Hui Yan hesitated for a while and said, "That strange place? It seems to be a cave." Lu Chen raised his eyebrows and said, "What, you don't remember?" Hui Yan said with some distress, "I only remember that I seem to have followed you into a cave. I don't remember anything else. Also, my whole body felt uncomfortable very quickly and I fainted. When I woke up again, it was already now." Lu Chen smiled and said, that's for the best. Actually, that's not important. You just need to remember that I did save your life. Hui Yan nodded silently. After walking for a while, he suddenly asked, was that a divine weapon given to you by the fire god, or some kind of ability? That has nothing to do with your fire god. Lu Chen replied resolutely. Oh. Hui Yan sighed and looked a little disappointed. Lu Chen snorted and turned his head. His face was expressionless, but deep in his heart, he suddenly became silent. After a while, he thought to himself, whether this seed has anything to do with the fire god or not, it probably has a deep relationship with the Black Fire tribe. Chapter 301. Since Hui Yan had already recovered, he seemed to be fine. It was as if his experience in the mysterious tree hole was really just a dream. However, on the following journey, Hui Yan seemed to have other thoughts. He would often furrow his brows, as if he was thinking about something. From time to time, he would glance at Lu Chen, looking a little hesitant. Lu Chen noticed Hui Yan's expression and became a little more cautious in his heart. No matter what, he and Hui Yan were ultimately two people from different races. Even though Hui Yan had once sworn a heavy oath, Lu Chen did not completely believe him. The ancient tree hole brought about by the mysterious seed was truly too miraculous. Anyone in the world who saw it would inevitably covet it. Not to mention that this thing was actually inextricably linked to the Black Fire tribe. If Hui Yan had some thoughts about it, it wouldn't be strange. However, as long as Hui Yan did not say anything, Lu Chen could only pretend that he did not see it. Otherwise, if he really went to question him, there was a possibility that they would immediately shed all pretense of cordiality. Lu Chen pretended to be deaf and mute, but it did not mean that Hui Yan would do the same. So, after the two of them walked in silence for a while, Hui Yan suddenly turned to face Lu Chen. As if he had made up his mind, he said, Lu Chen, wait a moment, I have something to say to you. Lu Chen sighed in his heart, nodded and stood still. However, at the same time, he waved his hand at a place behind him where Hui Yan could not see. Atsu, who was standing behind him, saw it and slowly walked to Lu Chen's side. On the previous journey, Lu Chen and Hui Yan had thought of a way to kill a monster that lived in the wilderness. The two of them and Atsu shared the food. Counting it, Atsu ate more than the two of them combined. It could be considered to be in a state of satiation. However, it was obvious that the kindness of a meal was not enough to shake the friendship between Atsu and Lu Chen. Therefore, Atsu did not hesitate to stand on Lu Chen's side. It growled softly and slowly revealed its snow-white fangs. Hui Yan did not seem to notice that Atsu was acting strangely. He still looked at Lu Chen. After a moment of hesitation, he said, Lu Chen, I have something here. Since I have already recognized you as the priest of our Black Fire tribe, I should give it to you. As he spoke, he took out a piece of animal skin and handed it to Lu Chen. Lu Chen was startled for a moment. It was somewhat unexpected, but he quickly calmed down. He nodded and took the animal skin. At the same time, he quietly kicked Atsu. Atsu, who was baring its fangs in a ferocious manner, suddenly froze. It looked innocently at Lu Chen and let out a grunt. It simply lay down on the ground at the side and lazily ignored these complicated and changeable humans. Lu Chen naturally did not care about it. He took the animal skin in his hand and looked at it. It felt a little rough to the touch and was very thick. At the same time, the color of the fur was very dark. For a moment, he could not tell what kind of animal fur it was. He could not help but ask curiously, what is this? Hui Yan sighed, his face looked a little bitter. He said, this is a witchcraft scroll that has been passed down from generation to generation in our Black Fire tribe. Recorded on it are a few witchcraft spells that only our Black Fire tribe shamans or priests can use. Here, he paused and seemed to hesitate for a moment. He then said, this thing has been damaged before. Right now, it can only be considered a remnant scroll. Lu Chen was shocked. After a moment of hesitation, he did not immediately open the animal skin. Instead, he stared at Hui Yan and said, I have not been to the fire god altar, nor have I truly obtained the recognition of your fire god. To your tribe, this scroll must be an exceptionally precious treasure. You are so assured to give it to me? Hui Yan was silent for a moment. He said, It is true that before, I was still somewhat wary of you. That is why I hid this scroll and did not give it to you. But after encountering the wolf pack, I understood. In this vast southern wilderness, strength was the most important thing. No matter if it was a large or small tribe, or a lone barbarian warrior, it was the same. Those with weak strength would eventually be destroyed by others. In this harsh wilderness, it would be difficult for them to survive. The priest was one of the most powerful people in a tribe. Because Hui Yan had previously concealed this secret, when the wolf pack suddenly appeared, if it wasn't for Lu Chen's mysterious and strange tree hole to hide in, there would most likely be no bones left. As for other distracting thoughts, as long as he believed that it was the will of the fire god, there was probably no need to be serious about it. These were the things that Hui Yan was thinking about right now. But, I am a human, and I have not been recognized by the fire god. Is this really okay? Lu Chen asked again. Hui Yan shook his head and said, If I had given this to you before, perhaps you would have learned a little of the witchcraft recorded on it. When we faced the wolf pack, we would not be so helpless. Lu Chen was startled for a moment. Then he waved the leather scroll in his hand and said with some disbelief, The witchcraft recorded on it is so powerful? Hui Yan thought for a moment, but he didn't seem too sure. He said, Our tribe hasn't had a priest for a very long time, so we don't know how powerful this witchcraft is. However, the stories passed down in the tribe are all praising the glory and strength of our ancestors in the past, so this witchcraft must be very powerful. Lu Chen was half convinced and half doubtful. After hesitating for a moment, he couldn't help but be curious and said, Then I'll read it? Hui Yan nodded and said, You can learn it. As long as you can learn the witchcraft recorded on it, I think, our tribe may really have hope of reviving. You think really far ahead. Lu Chen sighed at the stubborn ambition of this barbarian. Then he opened the leather scroll. This thick animal skin was folded into several layers, and the middle was tied with a thin rope. So it took a while to untie it. Perhaps it was because he knew the weight of this item. Lu Chen's movements were very careful. As for Hui Yan, who was standing to the side, he stared at Lu Chen's hand. After a while, Lu Chen finally completely opened the leather scroll. Under the dim light of dusk, the animal skin was unfolded in front of the two of them, revealing what was hidden inside. Hui Yan's breathing became noticeably rapid. His gaze swept over the animal skin, and then his eyes looked at Lu Chen. Deep in his eyes, there was a faint glimmer of anticipation. Lu Chen's expression was also solemn. He seriously looked at the writing on the animal skin, and there were also many strange portraits. For a good while, they didn't speak. Only when Lu Chen's gaze completely swept over the beast's skin and raised his head again did Hui Yan step forward with some excitement, asking him, How is it? What is the witchcraft written on it? Is it powerful? Lu Chen's expression looked a little strange. After taking a deep breath, he looked at Hui Yan and coughed, My apologies, I don't understand. You don't understand? Hui Yan was stunned for a moment, as if he couldn't react. Yes. Lu Chen nodded and pointed at the writing and pictures on the animal skin, I really don't understand. These words and pictures, I don't know what they mean. Could it be that this is the language of the barbarians? Hui Yan's eyebrows furrowed, but after a moment of hesitation, he shook his head and said, No, I've seen this animal skin before. The words on it are different from our Black Fire tribe, and even the majority of the barbarian tribes. Ah. Lu Chen was a little surprised. He didn't expect to hear such an answer. Wasn't this the witchcraft of the Black Fire tribe? Why couldn't even the barbarians of the Black Fire tribe understand it? What kind of logic was this? Hui Yan explained to Lu Chen, Actually, I've asked my father about this before. I heard him say that the words on this kind of witchcraft scroll actually belong to shamans and priests. Only they can understand it. And the most amazing thing is that the priests don't need to specially study it. As long as they have this power, they can naturally understand these things. Lu Chen frowned and raised his head to look at Huiyan. After a while, he suddenly laughed and said, "But I don't recognize it. Doesn't this mean that I'm not a priest at all?" Huiyan was suddenly speechless. A pained and confused expression flashed across his face. He murmured, "How is this possible? I clearly saw that you could use the power of the black fire. Is it because you're not a barbarian?" Lu Chen sighed and said, "Huiyan, although I really want to return to the north, and I also want to help you, but this kind of thing, let's not deceive ourselves and others." Huiyan stood stiffly in place, looking a little dazed. He was like a person who had countless beautiful hopes, but suddenly, all his beautiful dreams were shattered in an instant. Lu Chen looked like he couldn't bear to see Huiyan, but he immediately came to his senses. He secretly scolded himself for being too soft-hearted recently. He even felt pity for a barbarian. Thinking of this, he hardened his heart, but then he became worried. If he really couldn't become a priest of the Black Fire tribe, then it would be even more difficult to ask Huiyan about the secret of returning to the north. After all, this guy was someone who wouldn't divulge the secret even before he died. Sure enough, after a moment, Huiyan's expression began to turn cold. He extended his hand to Lu Chen and said, "Return the animal skin to me." Lu Chen frowned and didn't immediately return it. He asked, "What do you mean by this? Since you're sure that you're not a priest of the Black Fire tribe, then I don't think there's a need to go to the fire god altar," Huiyan said. Lu Chen nodded and said, "All right, this is a good thing. But since it's like this, I don't have any ill intentions towards the Black Fire tribe. I wonder if you can tell that secret too." "No." Huiyan's expression was calm, but it was unquestionable. Lu Chen looked at him for a while, then suddenly snorted and said indifferently, "Wait a little longer, I might have a way. Let's try it." Chapter 302. Huiyan looked suspiciously at Lu Chen and said, "What other ideas do you have?" Lu Chen said lightly, "Originally, I was not in the mood to become your tribe's priest, but in order to return to the north, I have to think of a way, right? In any case, let's see if your fire god has taken a liking to me." "Fire god?" Huiyan repeated, still somewhat confused. But perhaps because there was still some hope left, he did not immediately go up to take the animal skin, but instead took a few steps back and looked at Lu Chen. Perhaps in his heart, he still hoped that Lu Chen could become the Black Fire priest. After all, the hope of the Black Fire tribe rising again after many years of decline seemed to be gathered on this human who had mysteriously appeared out of nowhere. Lu Chen took a deep breath and reached out to feel around his chest. A moment later, the fire god's staff appeared in his hand. Standing at the side, Huiyan was startled, as if he had thought of something. He wanted to say something, but stopped himself. In the end, he stood at the side and watched silently. Lu Chen ignored him and only closed his eyes, as if adjusting his emotions in preparation. Atsu, who was at the side, did not seem to care about this. He looked up at the sky, only to see that the sky was gradually darkening. Stars gradually appeared in the clear night sky, twinkling in the distance. It was as if the gods of the heavens were silently watching the vicissitudes of the human world. "Woo!" Suddenly, a mournful howl came from the side, startling Lu Chen and Huiyan who had been holding their breath. When they turned their heads to look, they saw a huge black wolf straightening its neck and howling at the night sky. And in the distant sky, stars twinkled, and on the distant horizon, a bright moon was slowly rising. The world was cold and desolate. The moon was on the horizon, and the wolf was under the moon. In this vast wilderness, it looked like a boundless painting. Lu Chen retracted his gaze and coincidentally saw that Huiyan had also turned to look at them. The two of them looked at each other and felt an indescribable sense of awkwardness. Fortunately, they were not the type of people to mind such things. Lu Chen nodded at him and said, "I'll start." Huiyan responded, his expression turning serious once again. Lu Chen took a deep breath, clenched the Vulcan's staff in his hand, and narrowed his eyes. After a moment, he let out a soft shout, and the power of the black flames hidden deep in his body was activated. The fire god's staff reacted almost immediately. The various totems and runic patterns on the staff slowly shone brightly. At the same time, rays of light shot out. Although it was not the first time he had seen such a scene, when Huiyan saw the radiance of the fire god's staff, his face still revealed an uncontrollable excitement. His lips moved slightly as he muttered something. No one knew what he was thinking about at that moment. After a moment, the black flames slowly appeared in Lu Chen's eyes. Immediately after, in the deep night, there seemed to be a distant and ancient roar. It was like the night wind blew past, like an ancient song faintly playing. The black flames suddenly rose up, bursting out from the man's body. They began to burn all over his flesh and skin. His clothes were not damaged, and they danced and swayed wildly. Under the moonlight, he was like a demon in the darkness, crazy and strange. Huiyan's entire body shook, his eyes filled with disbelief. His mouth was so wide that he could not close it. At the same time, the beast's skin seemed to have received some kind of stimulation. It suddenly expanded and floated in front of Lu Chen, suddenly unfurling. Lu Chen's strange eyes, which were burning with black flames, looked over. On the beast's skin, there were specks of light that constantly flickered and danced. It was like joy, but also like crazy excitement. One by one, it was displayed in front of Lu Chen's eyes. Lu Chen's finger stretched out in the black flames and slowly moved down. Then, a voice came from the wind and drilled into Huiyan's ears. There really is a record of witchcraft on it, but it seems to be incomplete. That's right, that's right. Huiyan said excitedly. This is only a remnant of a scroll, but there should be some records on it. What is there? Lu Chen, who was wrapped in black flames, glanced at the beast skin remnant that was floating in the air. At the same time, he slowly said, there's not much left. There are only 3 types of witchcraft. One is bloodthirsty, one is hellfire, and the last one is. Halfway through his sentence, when he was still missing the name of the last witchcraft, Lu Chen's body suddenly trembled. His words were abruptly cut off. Just like that, he became silent and stared fixedly at the beast skin remnant, not saying anything for a long time. Huiyan, who was at the side, was so excited that he was grinding his teeth. Seeing Lu Chen suddenly cut off, he couldn't help but ask, there's still one more, what is that witchcraft? After a pause, he was a little worried and said, why, could it be that you can't understand it? Or that witchcraft is also incomplete? Neither, I can recognize it. Lu Chen's eyes, which were flashing with black flames, were still staring at the beast's skin. His voice seemed to have some strange emotions. It was a little more cold, and also seemed to have some deep hatred. There was even a trace of indescribable blankness. All kinds of emotions that he wanted to say but didn't want to say were intertwined at this moment, causing his expression to look especially complicated. These words, I can recognize them all, including the third witchcraft. Lu Chen paused for a while and said, this is Black Flame Curse. You really can understand this witchcraft scroll. Huiyan excitedly waved his fist, his face was completely overjoyed. For a moment, he didn't notice the somewhat strange expression on Lu Chen's face. Then he couldn't help but step forward and said, I am not mistaken, you are the priest that the fire god sent to guide our Black Fire tribe. Lu Chen didn't immediately answer him, but instead closed his eyes. After a while, the black flames surrounding his body slowly weakened and gradually retracted back into his flesh. When Lu Chen opened his eyes again, the black flames had completely disappeared. The beast's skin floating in the air trembled for a moment, then slowly floated down. Lu Chen stretched out his hand to catch it, then turned around and handed it to Huiyan. Huiyan shook his head and said, this beast's skin is originally a sacred inheritance belonging to the priest. It's just that our tribe hasn't had a priest for many years, so it was in my care. Now that you are the priest recognized by the fire god, this scroll should be given to you. Lu Chen was silent for a moment, then he raised the fire god's staff in his hand and said, including this? This time, Hui Yan hesitated for a moment, but very quickly nodded very firmly and said, including this fire god's staff. Lu Chen looked deeply at this barbarian, then nodded and said, okay. Although there are 3 witchcraft on this scroll, to be honest, I don't think that even if I learn these things, I will be able to bear the hope of the Black Fire Tribe's rise by myself. As they continued on their journey, Lu Chen said to Hui Yan. Hui Yan's face didn't show any signs of surprise. He looked very calm and said, I know. Lu Chen was a little surprised. He looked at him and said, you're actually not anxious? Hui Yan smiled, still looking a little helpless. He said, back then, the strongest part of our tribe's inheritance was actually left in the hands of our brothers who couldn't return to the ancestral land in the land of chaos. What we have now is probably not even 10% of what we had back then. Lu Chen nodded and said, Bloodlust is a support spell. After I use it, I can stimulate the power of the Black Fire Tribe's warriors and increase their battle power by more than double in a short period of time. But after that, there will be damage to the body. The more potential power that is stimulated, the more serious the damage will be. In the most serious cases, there is a possibility of death. Hui Yan didn't care about the last sentence. He nodded heavily and said with a face full of excitement, this is the witchcraft that our tribe has been looking forward to. Lu Chen looked at him strangely and continued, the second, Hellfire, is a powerful spell that directly attacks the enemy. It can engulf and burn an area in a short period of time, but it can't be used for long unless it is supported by powerful spiritual power. Hui Yan nodded repeatedly. Lu Chen continued, as for the third Black Flame Curse, this kind of curse can't be used immediately, but it entangles the soul. Those who are hit by it will almost certainly die. It is a very terrifying curse. Hui Yan made an "oh" sound. It seemed that he didn't care much about the third witchcraft. His mind was probably on how to increase the battle power of the entire Black Fire Tribe. Lu Chen looked at him and wanted to say something, but then he held it in. Although it doesn't seem to be much now, with these witchcraft, the battle power of our Black Fire Tribe will definitely rise to a new level. At least in the northern wilderness, the Thunder Lizard, Divine Wood, and Ghost Fox tribes, who were originally about the same strength as us, will definitely not be our match. Hui Yan looked very excited, full of anticipation and hope for the future. Lu Chen thought for a moment and asked him, then do you know more witchcraft? The more the merrier. Of course. Hui Yan nodded, but there was a hint of a bitter smile on his face. He said, but we really only have this little on hand. Even this was preserved by our ancestors with their lives. As for the other small tribes, they don't even have this little heritage. At this point, he seemed to have suddenly thought of something and said to Lu Chen, originally, our Black Fire Tribe was very strong in the area of witchcraft, but most of the inheritance was indeed in the hands of our brothers. You came from the north. When you passed through the disorienting lands, did you hear of the Black Fire Tribe there? Or perhaps, a tribe similar to our tribe? Lu Chen's expression changed slightly. He looked at Hui Yan, only to see Hui Yan looking at him with a face full of enthusiasm and hope. At that moment, countless figures and scenes flashed through Lu Chen's mind. The soaring flames, the corpses of the dead, and the painful and ferocious memories of the past flashed past one by one. But after a moment, he smiled at Hui Yan and said calmly, I've never heard of it. Chapter 303. Haven't heard of it? A trace of disappointment flashed across Hui Yan's face, but he quickly shook his head and regained his calmness. Perhaps this was a hope that even they didn't dare to hope for. In that harsh and desperate situation, in front of the overwhelming and incomparably powerful cultivator army of the human race, all of the barbarians that remained in the chaotic lands had a narrow escape. The night passed just like that. The clouds seemed to be calm and the wind was gentle, but the nights in the wilderness were still very cold. After dawn the next day, Hui Yan and Lu Chen continued their journey with Atsu. Lu Chen followed him for a while and noticed that they were walking towards the south. He couldn't help but ask in surprise, the fire god altar is further south? Yes. Huiyan said, it's in the southern land with abundant water and grass. Huh? Huiyan looked at the surprised Lu Chen and snorted, you don't really think that our southern wilderness is such a barren and withered land, do you? Lu Chen smiled and said, no one has ever been here before, it's not strange that they don't know. Huiyan thought about it and felt that this was indeed the case. Since ancient times, the barbarians had crossed the chaotic lands several times, but because of the incomparably chaotic nature of the 5 elements, the human race had never gone south. Those with profound cultivation were especially sensitive to the chaotic nature of the 5 elements. Ordinary people without spiritual power were not afraid of the chaotic nature of the 5 elements, but they simply couldn't cross the chaotic lands. Even if they were brought over, once they reached the southern wilderness, as an ordinary person, only death awaited them. Therefore, for many years, there really wasn't a single person from the human race that had ventured deep into the southern wilderness. Thinking of this, Huiyan's expression became a little strange. He couldn't help but turn his head to look at Lu Chen. Lu Chen smiled and didn't avoid it. He said with a smile, what's wrong? Do you feel that something's wrong? Huiyan coughed and said, more or less. But it doesn't matter. In any case, the most powerful cultivators of your human race can't come here. It's not a big deal for me to bring you there. Lu Chen smiled and nodded. He then said, yes. It's impossible for me to exterminate the entire barbarian race of the southern wilderness by myself, right? Huiyan also smiled and could not help but laugh heartily. Regardless of whether it was Huiyan or Lu Chen himself, neither of them took it to heart. In the blink of an eye, they forgot about it. Along the way, they mostly talked about the past and present of the Black Fire tribe, as well as the various legends of the mysterious fire god that was worshipped by the Black Fire tribe. From Huiyan's words, Lu Chen learned that the Black Fire tribe once had a glorious history. In the vast southern wilderness, they were once the most powerful tribe. They occupied the largest and best land and ruled over countless weak tribes. But this was all in the past. A few hundred years was enough to erase all the glory. Now, even ordinary small tribes like the Thunder Lizard and the Ghost Fox could be on equal footing with the Black Fire tribe. What made Huiyan most distressed was that he found that more and more people in the Black Fire tribe, and it could even be said that the majority of the tribe had accepted this reality. They began to forget the glory and splendor of their ancestors. They accepted the suffering and weakness of today. They struggled just to survive and prolong their feeble existence. They were like the weakest sand rabbits in the wilderness that were preyed on by countless beasts. Moreover, they seemed to feel very happy and normal. Lu Chen listened quietly, and most of the time, he didn't say a word. It was only when Huiyan paused that he suddenly asked, "You don't want this?" "Of course I don't want to." Huiyan straightened his tall and burly body. From his body, one could still vaguely see the heroic bearing of the invincible Black Fire warrior who had once galloped across this land. He said, "Our tribe shouldn't be like this. We must take back what our ancestors left behind." Lu Chen looked at him and didn't speak for a while. Huiyan felt that Lu Chen's gaze was strange, and asked with some doubt, "What's wrong?" Lu Chen said, "I know you have great ambitions. But have you ever thought that if you insist on doing this, you might also kidnap the entire Black Fire tribe to do that extremely dangerous thing with you?" Huiyan immediately said, "That's not dangerous. It's to follow the great cause of restoring the glory of our ancestors. Even if it's a little bit of risk, it's nothing." Lu Chen nodded and said, "Then have you ever thought that perhaps not everyone in the Black Fire tribe is like you, willing to do this at all costs? Perhaps some people." Don't stare at me like that. I have to make these things clear to you. Otherwise, if I really become the priest of the Black Fire tribe in the future, I would at least know what to do." Huiyan nodded silently. After a while, he said, "Okay, continue." Lu Chen said again, "If there really are some people in the Black Fire tribe who don't want to fight with their lives on the line, and don't want to shed blood for the glory of your ancestors that you have long lost, then what will you do? When Huiyan heard Lu Chen speak halfway, his face had already turned cold. After a while, he said coldly, with the great cause of our ancestors before us, we can't have such spineless people. And as a member of the Black Fire tribe, it's only right for us to fight with our lives on the line. Is it for the tribe, or for your dream? Lu Chen interrupted him, staring intently at this barbarian's eyes. Huiyan's gaze was slightly cold as he looked at Lu Chen. Lu Chen met his gaze without flinching. After a while, Huiyan said indifferently, it's for the Black Fire tribe. Lu Chen stared at him for a while, then nodded and said, okay, I understand. According to Huiyan, the holy land of the Black Fire tribe, the fire god altar, was hidden somewhere deep in the mountains in the south. That place used to be the territory of the Black Fire tribe when they were at their peak, but times had already changed. As for why the Black Fire tribe abandoned their ancestral land and went to such a desolate place in the north, Huiyan did not explain the reason in detail. But Lu Chen could more or less guess that it was because they were too weak and were chased away. There couldn't be any other reason. Lu Chen wisely did not ask about these sad past events, but he still asked Huiyan about which powerful barbarian tribes were in control of the wasteland. After all, if he really had to work hard for the Black Fire tribe in the future, he had to know about these things. But when he asked about this matter, a strange feeling floated in his heart. It was a faintly familiar feeling, as if he had suddenly returned to 10 years ago. At that time, he was still a shadow. Now, he seemed to have transformed into a shadow, intentionally or unintentionally asking about the secrets of the wasteland, even if he might never be able to return to the human race. Huiyan did not doubt him, and probably thought that it was normal for Lu Chen to know about these things for the sake of the Black Fire tribe, so he very readily told Lu Chen everything. Nowadays in the southern wilderness, there was no longer a powerful tribe like the Black Fire tribe that stood out like the sun in the sky. Instead, there were the 4 great barbarian tribes of water, wood, earth, and thunder. It could be said that the southern wilderness was divided and ruled by the 4 great barbarian tribes. And the most similar thing about these 4 great barbarian tribes was that each of them had a great shaman whose cultivation, experience, wisdom, and knowledge were far superior to ordinary priests. The legendary shaman who could move mountains and fill the seas, and had boundless magical power. Lu Chen was silent, deep in thought, and did not speak. Around noon of this day, Lu Chen and Huiyan suddenly discovered a strange movement in the wasteland in front of them. Yellow sand billowed and blew with the wind. The momentum was very similar to when they encountered the wolf pack a few days ago. Both of them were startled. However, it was fortunate that they were still quite a distance away. Just as they were about to avoid it, Huiyan suddenly seemed to have seen something in the distance. He abruptly halted his footsteps and carefully observed the smoke and dust for a long while. He looked at the faintly discernible running figures behind the yellow sand, as well as the cries of an even larger and more ferocious army. He fell into deep thought. A moment later, he let out a long sigh and spoke in a somewhat helpless manner. I think I know why the wolf pack has suddenly come to the north. Well, what is the reason? The Thunder Shaman's tribe has come. Chapter 304. The name, Thunder Shaman, made Lu Chen immediately think of the Fire Shaman. The impression of that old barbarian shaman in his memory was so deep that he subconsciously turned his head to look at Huiyan. They both had the bloodline of the Black Fire tribe, but Huiyan didn't seem to have any similarities with that incomparably powerful fire shaman. One was old, gloomy and deep, while the other was hot-blooded and full of hope. The difference was like the sun and the moon. But then again, the difference in strength between the two was like heaven and earth. In fact, Huiyan simply couldn't be compared with the fire shaman. Lu Chen felt strange that such a strange idea had suddenly appeared in his mind. As for the thunder shaman that Huiyan had recognized, he was one of the most powerful figures in the southern wilderness. The tribe he belonged to was called Thunder Cloud. It was similar to the Thunder Lizard tribe that Lu Chen had seen before, but there was a world of difference between the two. The Thundercloud tribe relied on the protection of the Thunder Shaman to become one of the most powerful tribes in the wilderness in recent years. They and several other powerful tribes divided and occupied the former territory of the Black Fire tribe, which was the most fertile land in the southern wilderness. Their strength was far above that of the Black Fire, Thunder Lizard, and other small tribes. Oh, so that's how it is. But what does this have to do with the wolf pack that you mentioned? Lu Chen asked Huiyan. Huiyan glanced at the yellow sand that had been blown up and said, "Those powerful tribes often like to hunt." Huh? Huiyan said, "Tribes like our Black Fire tribe usually go out to hunt. We find and kill some demon beasts and drag them back to the camp, which is a good food rations. But tribes like the Thunder Cloud tribe have already prepared all the supplies and don't lack food. Therefore, they often hold hunts. Although they also hunt demon beasts, it's more to show off their martial prowess." Lu Chen was silent for a while, then said, "It sounds like their hunting momentum is much greater than yours." "That's a lot bigger." A trace of helplessness flashed across Huiyan's face as he said, "For a top clan like Lei Yun, the number of demonic beasts they kill in a single hunt is at least 10 times that of us. Therefore, at times like this, some of the intelligent demonic beasts have no choice but to avoid the sharp edge, and leave their original habitats to flee in all directions." Only now did Lu Chen understand why Huiyan was confused about why the wolf pack came here. These demon wolves did not belong here, and they probably did not like this barren land, so they would not come here. It was only after receiving the crushing expulsion of the Thundercloud tribe that the wolf pack had no choice but to temporarily hide here. And the price was that the two of them were almost buried in the belly of the wolf. "I wonder if this is considered an undeserved calamity. Then what do we do now?" Lu Chen asked Huiyan. With regards to the situation of the southern wilderness, Lu Chen was almost in the dark. After all, no human had come here for many years, so it could be said that he knew nothing about the situation of the barbarian tribe. He could only honestly ask this barbarian, who had treated him quite well. Huiyan answered him without hesitation, "Of course, avoid them, and don't provoke them." Huh? Lu Chen was a little surprised. In his original impression, the barbarian tribe were mostly ferocious, and lacked the ability to adapt. They were often fearless in the face of danger, and refused to retreat. However, Huiyan's performance these past few days had made him have a whole new level of respect for him. From the first time they met, to the way back, to the camp of the Black Fire tribe, and then all the way here, Huiyan had displayed a special characteristic that was different from the majority of the barbarian tribe. He was both brave and fearless, yet he was calm and wise, and it was even to the extent that he could endure and make concessions. Moreover, he possessed an ability that exceeded everyone's expectations. Once he noticed something unusual about Lu Chen, he'd practically thought through everything in an extremely short period of time and decided to make a huge gamble. If the person who made the decision was Lu Chen, to be honest, even Lu Chen didn't believe that he could do what Huiyan did. But unfortunately, there was no if in this world. "Do we have to avoid these people?" Lu Chen asked him again. Huiyan nodded and said, "This can't be helped. All the tribes in the wilderness will not be too polite to foreign barbarians who travel alone. They will usually interrogate and search them. If they encounter a situation that is not pleasing to the eye, and their own tribe is strong, they will directly attack or even kill them. This is also a common thing." Lu Chen grinned, and thought that in the southern wilderness, martial strength was indeed the most important thing. If one were to travel alone, not only would he have to guard against demon beasts and all kinds of dangers, he would also have to be careful of his fellow barbarians, as long as they were not from the same tribe. Then, the two of them took a turn, and avoided the yellow sand in front of them, and turned to the other side. But in the middle of this, a mournful wolf howl suddenly sounded from the yellow sand in the air. Atsu was the first to stop, and then looked back. At this time, Lu Chen noticed that there seemed to be a trace of anger in Atsu's eyes, and he would occasionally let out a low growl. It seemed that he was somewhat angry. And after a while, a cool breeze blew from the sky, brushing against the yellow sand. They finally saw a corner of the yellow sand. When they looked from afar, they saw a pack of wolves. Those ferocious and terrifying demon beasts were madly howling in pain at this moment. Hundreds of agile barbarians were surrounding them. They were holding all kinds of weapons in their hands, and were ferociously stabbing the bodies of these wolves. Blood-red light burst out from under the tough fur, followed by unimaginable painful howls. The strong male wolves in the wolf pack were desperately fighting against those barbarian warriors, trying to protect the weaker female wolves and the pups so that they could escape. However, under the yellow sand, the blades were like snow. The barbarians had formed a circle, and were laughing wildly as they gathered. The weaker female wolves and wolf cubs were the first to be chopped to death. Then, the crazed male wolves launched a desperate attack against the barbarian warriors. But they were met with an even more powerful and terrifying force. It didn't take long for the entire pack of wolves to fall into a pool of blood. It was unknown how many severed limbs had fallen in this wilderness. It was a bloody scene. This originally powerful pack of wolves had been completely annihilated in one day. "Let's go." Lu Chen was the first to react. He lowered his voice and asked Huiyan, who was in a daze, "Let's go." Huiyan seemed to have woken up from a dream. His body trembled, and then he said softly, "Yes, let's go." The two had already packed up. They didn't have anything else to worry about. Just like that, they left with large strides. The strong smell of blood filled this land. They killed an entire pack of demon wolves. Lu Chen asked Huiyan as they walked. "What if they caught one or a group of people? Those people will die even more miserably. Although those demon wolves are ferocious, most of them were killed with a single slash. But if the two of us were to fall into the hands of the Thunder Cloud tribe, what will happen?" Huiyan smiled. "We barbarians don't have such a thing as a captive. They will die." "Yes, and they will usually die very miserably. In those large tribes, there is no lack of madmen who like to torture us small tribes." Lu Chen frowned. He didn't say anything, but his expression didn't look good either. Huiyan quickly walked forward. At the same time, he said, "Don't worry. As long as we go to the fire god altar, we won't let anyone do as they please." Lu Chen glanced at him. He didn't know why Huiyan was so confident. But it seemed that he worshipped the fire god. "Huiyan?" "Yes? If I really become a priest in the Black Fire tribe in the future, I will help you. But there are conditions. But it is still too early to talk about these things. But you keep saying that the relationship between a priest and a shaman is only that of a superior and subordinate. Then, do I have any hope of becoming a shaman in the future?" Huiyan was startled. He first smiled, then became silent. After thinking for a while, he said, "You can." Lu Chen was shocked. "You really can?" Huiyan took a deep breath and said softly, "If you can become a shaman in the future, then it will be the time for our Black Fire tribe to return to the central region. It will be the time for us to recover the glory of our ancestors." Lu Chen stared at him for a while. After confirming that this different barbarian was not joking, he couldn't help but be silent. He then nodded and said, "Very good." Chapter 305. Huiyan was very afraid of the Thunder Cloud tribe where the Thunder Shaman was. He took Lu Chen far away from the main force of the Thunder Cloud tribe. Even if he had to take a big detour and walk twice the distance, he was still willing. Lu Chen did not say much about this. He only chatted with Huiyan along the way, and inquired more about the situation of the southern border barbarian tribe, especially the powerful shaman that Huiyan mentioned. In Huiyan's eyes, or from what he said, the shaman that Lu Chen heard was undoubtedly an exceptionally powerful and terrifying existence. It could turn the world upside down, move the mountains and drain the seas, and destroy everything in the southern wilderness, unless another shaman stood up to contend against it. Lu Chen did not comment on this, and most of the time he remained silent. But it was not like he had never seen the so-called barbarian shaman before. The fire shaman in the Battle of the Desolate Valley was indeed an extremely powerful barbarian. He had left Lu Chen with an unforgettable pain that made him wish he was dead for many years. But even so, Lu Chen did not think that the fire shaman's strength could reach the terrifying level that Hui Yan described. In fact, Lu Chen had great doubts about whether the barbarian shaman's strength could approach the level of the deity transformation stage of the human race. In his view, the barbarian shaman's strength should be similar to the Yuanying stage of the human race, perhaps a little stronger, but certainly not much stronger. As for the reason, it was actually very simple. If the barbarian shaman was really as powerful and terrifying as Hui Yan said, then there was no need for anyone else. Just the 3 or 4 shamans in the southern wilderness could probably directly flatten the vast divine land of the human race in the north. Unfortunately, now that 1,000 years had passed, the barbarian tribe could only curl up in the southern wilderness, relying on the natural barrier of the land of chaos to separate the north and the south to survive. Yes, when Lu Chen looked at Hui Yan and the vast wilderness, these were some words of disdain that flashed across his heart. The barbarians were certainly strong, but in the face of the powerful strength of the human race in the cultivation age, if there was no barrier of the land of chaos, the southern wilderness barbarians would only have a dead end. After avoiding the Thunder Cloud tribe, Lu Chen, Hui Yan, Atsu, and the 2 humans and 1 wolf had a relatively smooth journey. They took a long detour in the middle and ran into some small troubles. Most of them were encounters with other barbarians or powerful demonic beasts. If they encountered a small demonic beast, they would kill it if they could. If they couldn't defeat a big demonic beast, they would run away. As for the other barbarians, they would avoid them as much as they could. If they really couldn't avoid them, they would ask Hui Yan to come forward and negotiate with them. Originally, Lu Chen's identity and appearance were a huge problem, but Hui Yan was clearly prepared. He pulled out a linen hood that could cover his head, covering Lu Chen's face. Those barbarians were simple-minded, so they didn't check carefully. They probably didn't expect that a northerner would suddenly come to the wilderness in these thousands of years. However, this linen robe was coarse and shabby, making it very uncomfortable. Lu Chen asked Hui Yan where it came from. Hui Yan laughed dryly and said that it was passed down by an ancestor when the Black Fire tribe still had priests. Lu Chen smiled faintly. It seemed that the Black Fire tribe had been in a miserable state for many years. Along the way, although little troublemakers appeared from time to time, they didn't run into a desperate situation like when they were surrounded by the wolf pack. Finally, they arrived at the sacred mountain where the fire god's altar was. In Hui Yan's words, it was thanks to the fire god's blessing that they were able to arrive safely. Lu Chen asked him with a smile. If the fire god was really blessing the Black Fire tribe and Hui Yan, why didn't the Black Fire tribe improve after so many years? Hui Yan retorted without hesitation. All of this must be the fire god's test for the Black Fire tribe. It was a punishment for the Black Fire tribe's wrongdoings. Now that the punishment was over, the fire god would naturally protect them again. Lu Chen asked curiously, "How do you know the punishment is over?" Hui Yan pointed at him and said, "Aren't you here? You came here and became the Black Fire tribe's priest. That is the fire god's reward for the Black Fire tribe. Since the reward is here, then the punishment is over. There is great hope for the revival of the Black Fire tribe." Lu Chen speechlessly looked up at the sky and smiled bitterly. The so-called sacred mountain was actually a towering mountain range in the southern wilderness. From the outside, there wasn't anything too strange about it. It was similar to the hills and peaks that Lu Chen saw along the way. Most of the peaks were bare, and some parts were sparsely covered with trees. It was completely incomparable to the fertile and dense forests of the human Xiationists. But even so, looking at it from another angle, this kind of desolation was actually filled with a vigorous and boundless primitive aura. There was a faint sense of valiance. The sacred mountain was also called the Fire God Mountain, but these 2 names were used by the Black Fire tribe. For many years, they had kept this important altar and holy land a secret. Therefore, the other barbarians didn't know about this place and only treated it as an ordinary mountain. They didn't even have a name. After Hui Yan arrived at the Fire God Mountain, he immediately became excited. He knelt down at the foot of the mountain and kowtowed heavily while chanting. Lu Chen listened from the side. The general meaning was that the Black Fire tribe was guilty of letting the fire god's sacred land desolate for so many years. One day, with the blessing of the god, the Black Fire tribe would rise again and rebuild the sacred altar to increase the glory of the fire god. In short, he made a lot of beautiful promises. Hui Yan stood up with a pious expression after he finished saying these words, or rather, after he finished drawing these large flatbreads. He turned around and glanced at Lu Chen. He was startled and asked, "What's wrong with you? Why is your expression so strange?" Lu Chen said, "It's nothing. I just suddenly thought of something. What you said just now sounded very familiar. Is it that every time the Black Fire tribe prays to the fire god for so many years, does it?" Hui Yan thought about it and looked a little embarrassed. But he still nodded and said, "More or less." Lu Chen shook his head and walked forward. At the same time, he said, "It's nothing. Let's go. I hope the fire god can really hear your wishes." Gods were all high and mighty, mysterious, and unfathomable. Therefore, whether or not the fire god heard Hui Yan's prayer and listened to his words, no one knew. But at least on the way into the mountains, they had a smooth journey and did not meet with any trouble. For this, Hui Yan thanked the fire god 3 or 4 times along the way. Even Lu Chen had to admit that this barbarian's worship of the fire god was indestructible and deeply rooted. But at this moment, Lu Chen had already lost interest in this problem. He was more concerned about another matter. "Hui Yan," Lu Chen called out to the barbarian. "Didn't you say that the Black Fire tribe left this place many years ago? Why do I feel like you're still very familiar with this place?" Hui Yan's face was filled with pain and bitterness as he said, "Most of the tribesmen really don't know anything about this place. At most, they only know that there is a sacred altar in the south that our Black Fire tribe's ancestors worshipped. For a long time, this secret has only been passed down by the tribe leader's bloodline. Then, every time the successor comes of age, they will find a chance to sneak here once to get to know the old path and worship the fire god. Just like that, this secret has been passed down from generation to generation." Lu Chen frowned. Has this always been the way to pass down the secret? After so many years, even with the Black Fire tribe's current predicament, even if you are the bloodline of the tribe leader, you still haven't lost this secret. It really isn't easy. Hui Yan proudly said, "This is all because of the fire god's blessing." Lu Chen. "Alright, you're right." Fire God Mountain looked tall and majestic. Although many of the peaks were bare, there was a powerful aura within the desolation. Hui Yan led Lu Chen and Atsu into the mountains for another 2 days, and finally arrived at a remote canyon. When Lu Chen arrived here, especially in this canyon where black rocks could be seen everywhere, including many large black rocks exposed in the gravel, he felt his feet and surroundings start to heat up. The deeper they went, the stronger this feeling became. At the same time, the number of black rocks around them increased. For some reason, Lu Chen suddenly thought of the terrifying abyss of chaos that he had accidentally approached. In the surroundings of that most dangerous place in the world, there seemed to be many black rocks. At the same time, in the depths of that strange and unpredictable abyss of chaos, black seemed to be the main color there. But of course, this place could not be compared to the abyss of chaos. Hui Yan led Lu Chen all the way to the deepest part of the canyon, and then looked around vigilantly. After confirming that no one was spying on them, he knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times in a pious manner. Then, he found an inconspicuous rock pillar that was half exposed from the ground, about 3 feet high. Lu Chen watched from the side for a long time, but he couldn't figure out what was so special about this black rock pillar. However, Hui Yan had chosen it. With this black rock pillar as the starting point, the barbarian walked 7 steps towards the north, then another 36 steps towards the east, and another 3 steps towards the north. Finally, he stopped at an open space. Under Lu Chen's somewhat surprised gaze, Hui Yan laid down on the ground, and with an extremely strange rhythm, patted the ground 4 times in different directions within a 3 feet radius. Just as Lu Chen was feeling bewildered, suddenly, he heard a muffled sound. A heavy stone slab slowly moved away from the ground, revealing a deep, bottomless tunnel that extended downwards. "Let's go." Hui Yan turned and said to Lu Qin, "The altar is below." Chapter 306. The altar is underground? Lu Chen was a little surprised. He glanced at Hui Yan and asked. Hui Yan nodded his head and beckoned to Lu Chen to follow. Then, he took the lead and walked down. Lu Chen turned his head to look at Atsu. He saw that Atsu was also staring at the dark and deep underground tunnel. Apart from that, there didn't seem to be any special reaction. Lu Chen was silent for a moment, but he still followed. Atsu followed behind him and walked into the stone tunnel. When they entered the underground cave, they saw Hui Yan standing at the side of the stone steps that extended downwards. He reached out his hand and grabbed a stone on the wall. Then, they heard a rumbling sound, and the heavy stone slab closed behind them. The light in the cave suddenly dimmed. But after a while, when Lu Chen's eyes gradually adapted to the darkness, he discovered that in the distance of this underground passage, there was a faint dark red light swaying gently. Although the light was still very weak, he could already vaguely see the shadows of the stone steps around him. There was a stuffy air coming from the front, but it wasn't stifling. It was like a faintly discernible hot wind blowing from the depths of the cave. Apart from that, there was nothing strange. The surroundings were very quiet. After a while, Hui Yan's low voice sounded from the side. He said in a low voice, "Let's go down." The underground stone tunnel was big enough that even a burly barbarian like Hui Yan could walk with his back straight. Lu Chen followed behind him in silence. His eyes would occasionally look around. At this moment, the surroundings were quiet. Apart from the sound of their footsteps, there seemed to be no other movement. It was so quiet that one could even hear their own heartbeat. With the help of the dim light, Lu Chen saw that both sides of the tunnel were incomparably hard stone walls. He had never seen the stone on the walls before. They looked dark and deep, and there were some strange patterns on them. As he walked, he found an opportunity to touch the stone wall beside him. He immediately discovered that the stone wall was not cold, but rather warm. This was obviously different from an ordinary underground cave, but it seemed to make sense that this was the location of the fire god altar worshipped by the Black Fire tribe. After all, if the gods were called the god of fire, it was only natural for them to be scorching hot. However, there was another question that Lu Chen did not understand. Therefore, he could not help but ask Hui Yan, why was this altar built underground? Hui Yan, who was walking in front, paused for a moment, as if he was a little taken aback by this. He then said, "I don't know either. It's been like this ever since I found out about this place." He paused for a moment and then, as if he wanted to affirm Lu Chen, he added, "It has been like this since the time of our ancestors, or should I say, since the time of the fire god altar." Lu Chen furrowed his brows, and his expression was a little puzzled. He said, "But the gods and the like, in the legends, don't they always live in the celestial realm?" Hui Yan laughed and waved his hand, saying, "I've never heard of this. It's probably what you humans say. Moreover, even if the fire god altar was built underground, there must be an ancient reason. You can't say that the fire god is not a god from the celestial realm, right?" Lu Chen wanted to say something, but stopped. After thinking for a while, he nodded and said, "What you said makes sense." Hui Yan laughed, and did not take it to heart. He continued to walk forward. Lu Chen looked at his back, and his expression changed. The light and shadow from afar fell on his face, making his expression look gloomy and uncertain. In the human race of the divine continent, since ancient times, the gods lived in the heavens, and all the altars were built in the open. Apart from natural disasters, landslides, no other god's sacrificial ground would be in the dark underground. In the long history of the human race, there were no gods who built their altars underground. Those who built their altars deep underground had nothing to do with the gods of the heavens. What was hidden deep underground was the third realm that corresponded to the immortal realm and the human realm, the demons and monsters of the underworld. When Lu Chen thought of this, he felt a slight chill in his heart. When he looked at Huiyan's back, his gaze became cold. However, Lu Chen had no intention of saying these words to this barbarian who worshipped the fire god. Otherwise, Huiyan might not even want the priest that he had been looking forward to, and would fight to the death with him, a human who slandered the gods. When no one spoke, time seemed to pass especially slowly. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the dark and gloomy cave, and the stone steps under their feet seemed to extend endlessly downwards. Lu Chen felt that he had walked for a very long time, but the scenery in front of him did not seem to have changed much. However, for some reason, when he looked at this dark tunnel that went deep underground, Lu Chen had a frightening feeling that this was the entrance to the depths of the ghost world. The only thing that changed was that the originally faint and blurry light in front of them, as they continued to descend, it finally began to gradually become clearer and brighter. After walking like this for an unknown amount of time, Lu Chen felt that the surrounding air suddenly began to become stuffy. At the same time, the red light in front of them suddenly brightened, and then a strange low muffled sound was heard. The sound was like a tide, and also like a gale, vigorous and solemn. Just as Lu Chen was surprised and bewildered, Huiyan suddenly stopped in his tracks, and then with a tone that was mixed with excitement, admiration, worship and fanaticism, he said, "We're here." The "here" in his words naturally referred to the fire god altar. Lu Chen took a deep breath, hurried a few steps, quickly walked to Huiyan's side, and then looked ahead. Right now the dark red light had already become extremely bright, because the source of the light had already appeared in front of him. When the magnificent scene appeared in front of Lu Chen's eyes, even with his vast experience, he couldn't help but tremble. In the depths of this deep underground cave, there really wasn't any immortal aura like in the legends of the human race, but here there was a completely different kind of majestic existence. At the end of the black stone tunnel, there was a huge underground cave. A wave of heat blasted out, accompanied by rumbling sounds. That was the source of all the red light, that was the scarlet red burning magma. The scene in front of Lu Chen's eyes, without any concealment, appeared in front of him, the huge underground cave, crisscrossing rivers, a few narrow rocks connected to form a passageway, the rest of the place was completely filled with scorching and scarlet red magma. All the magma was constantly flowing, big and small bubbles rising on the surface of the magma, expanding, and then exploding. Even from far away, he could feel the scorching heat. It wasn't hard to imagine the terrifying temperature of the magma. The entire subterranean cavern was surrounded by this huge magma river. All of the magma flowed continuously in one direction, and everywhere it passed, flames would burn. And in the deepest part of the cave, there was a huge black boulder that was only 3 feet tall on the surface of the magma. It had a circumference of 2 feet, and there were 5 black stone pillars towering over it. When the magma flowed past this boulder, it was unknown what kind of strange terrain there was, but a huge whirlpool actually appeared. As a result, all the magma spun and whistled, contrary to its previous slow speed. It rushed into this whirlpool at an increasingly fast speed. Countless scorching flames struck the hard black boulder, making a sound like thunder, and then finally disappeared into the depths of the whirlpool, as if once again flowing into the depths of the earth, that unpredictable place. That is the fire god altar. Huiyan turned around, and said loudly to Lu Chen. In this underground cave, because the sound of the magma river was rather loud, he had no choice but to raise his voice. Lu Chen took a deep breath, immediately felt the scorching heat in the air directly into his lungs. There was a slight burning sensation. His expression changed slightly. This was the first time he had seen this kind of place. It was really strange and unpredictable. Then he turned to Huiyan, also raising his voice to ask him, "Then what do we do now?" "Go there." Huiyan pointed at the huge boulder with the 5 black stone pillars from afar, and then walked forward. Lu Chen hesitated for a moment, then turned around and made a gesture to Atsu, indicating that it should stay in this cave passage. Then he himself followed Huiyan and walked over. The path to the huge black boulder, which was also the fire god altar that Huiyan spoke of, was actually a few large boulders that were exposed on the surface of the magma river. They were a little closer to each other, some places could be walked, and some places had to risk jumping over the magma. Looking at the raging flames below, the bright red and bubbling magma, even Huiyan, who worshipped the fire god very much and was an extremely valiant barbarian himself, couldn't help but become cautious and solemn. If he were to accidentally make a mistake, then he would only end up with nothing left of his corpse. Huiyan took the lead and walked forward, and Lu Chen followed behind him, walking and leaping forward on the black stone path. Not long after, they came to a fork in the road. Separated by the magma, one side was the huge boulder that was close to the fire god altar, while the other side that was separated by the magma extended to the other side of the cave. Just as Lu Chen was about to jump over, he was suddenly pulled back by Huiyan. Lu Chen looked at him with some surprise, only to see Huiyan pointing to the other side, and said, "Go that way." As he said this, he leaped and jumped towards the rock that was even further away. Lu Chen hesitated for a moment, then also followed, and then asked Huiyan, "Why not take the shortcut?" Huiyan shook his head, and said, "This is the rule passed down by our black flame ancestor. At the fire god altar, we can only take the long road, we cannot take the shortcut." Lu Chen was silent for a moment, his eyes slightly flickered, and said, "What if we take the shortcut, what will happen?" Huiyan, who was about to walk forward, suddenly stopped, and then stopped. Chapter 307. What, you can't say, or this question can't be asked? Seeing that Huiyan's expression was a little strange, Lu Chen didn't show any fear, and calmly asked another question. Huiyan was silent for a while, then said, "I don't know." Huiyan said, "For so many years, everyone who came here followed the teachings of our ancestors. No one has ever doubted these words, and no one has ever asked this question." Lu Chen nodded, and didn't say anything more. Huiyan's gaze was fixed on Lu Chen. After a while, he suddenly said, "I originally thought that you were a gift from the fire god to our black fire tribe, and that you would lead our tribe to prosperity. But now, I suddenly can't make up my mind." Why is that?" Lu Chen raised his eyebrows. He wasn't angry, but asked Huiyan curiously. Huiyan's face showed some hesitation, then he said, "Along the way, I could see that although you have the same power as the fire god, you don't have any reverence for the fire god. Not only that, you have no reverence for our tribe, for all the rules, customs, and gods of the southern wilderness." This tall and burly barbarian stood on the burning river of lava. From afar, it seemed as if his entire body was burning. He stared at Lu Chen, a complicated expression on his face, and his voice became abnormally low. "I now feel that everything you do in the future will be out of line with the people of the wasteland. It will be unexpected, and there will be unpredictable consequences. I also don't know what you will do when you become the priest of our black fire tribe, and lead us to a true revival. Will it be good or bad for our tribe?" "So, you regret it?" Lu Chen asked lightly. Then, on the black rock that suddenly burst into flames in the lava, the two men suddenly became silent. They faced each other, looking straight at each other, and there seemed to be sparks flying in their eyes. After an unknown amount of time, when the stiff and cold atmosphere seemed to reach an unbearable point, Huiyan suddenly turned around and walked forward. At the same time, he said in a low voice, "Follow me, the altar is right in front of us." Looking at the tall figure of the barbarian, Lu Chen was silent for a moment, but he still followed. For the rest of the time, the two of them did not speak. They walked one after another, leaping over several extremely dangerous lava fractures. It was equivalent to making a big circle around the surroundings, and then gradually moving inwards, approaching the huge black rock with the fire god's altar one ring at a time. Halfway through, Lu Chen suddenly felt that this strange and complicated path was actually somewhat like a circle of inward converging whirlpools, just like the huge whirlpool that appeared in the magma river under the Vulcan altar. Was it a coincidence? Lu Chen glanced at the lava whirlpool that was getting closer and closer. His expression was calm, without any change, but a trace of doubt flashed across his eyes. The two of them walked in this manner for almost 3 rounds, before finally finishing this inexplicably long stone path. Very quickly, at the last place close to the Vulcan altar, an abnormally wide fracture appeared in front of the two of them. It was almost twice the width of the other places. The surging, roaring, and scorching lava flowed under the rock, making one's hair stand on end. Although the scene in front of them looked very dangerous, to Huiyan and Lu Chen, it was not too difficult. Huiyan could be considered as the strongest among the ordinary barbarian warriors. His strength was ferocious, and his agility was valiant. With a leap with all his might, he jumped over the fracture. As for Lu Chen, with the support of the black flames, it was not a problem for him to pass through this obstacle. After seeing Lu Chen's body lit up with the light of the black flames, and after jumping over the fracture, Huiyan's tensed face finally softened a little. He nodded to Lu Chen, then turned around and walked towards the location of the 5 black stone pillars. "Hey!" At this moment, Lu Chen suddenly opened his mouth to call out. Huiyan's body paused for a moment, then he turned to look at him and said, "What's wrong?" Lu Chen looked straight into his eyes, his expression calm, and said, "Before we go to the altar, I feel that there are some things that I should say to you." Huiyan was silent for a moment, then nodded and walked to Lu Chen's side, saying, "Speak. If we don't talk about the fire god that you all worship, from the beginning, it was you who insisted that I enter the Black Fire tribe to help you, and used the secret of returning to the north to threaten me. From the beginning to the end, I did not take the initiative to get involved in your tribe's matters, is that right?" "But that is indeed the fire god," Lu Chen interrupted Huiyan's words, and said, "I said, if we don't talk about the fire god's decree for now, is that right?" Huiyan slightly lowered his head, and after a moment, he nodded and said, "Yes." Lu Chen said, "At the same time, you also saw that I am a human, different from you. But after weighing the pros and cons, even if you had to face many objections and suspicions, you still chose to believe in me, and wanted me to help you, is that right?" Huiyan took a deep breath, and his face became somewhat solemn. After a while, he said, "Yes." Lu Chen lightly said, "Then you should also understand that as a human, I have no interest in your tribe or anything in the southern wilderness. I am here today only to find out from you a way to return to the north. And to do this, I can only obtain it by helping your tribe to become strong again. So I can only help you, you don't have to doubt me on this. But other than that, my actions in the future will definitely not be exactly what you expect. If it is really for the prosperity of the Black Fire tribe, you have to give me a promise right now. Can you completely trust me? Otherwise, what if you suddenly turn hostile and stab me in the back when I am halfway through my task? Then wouldn't I be wronged?" Huiyan became silent, and after a while, he said in a low voice, "All the barbarians in the wilderness believe in the gods, and worship the ancestors of the tribe. Only you are not." Lu Chen shrugged his shoulders and said, "You are right." Huiyan suddenly became a little agitated, and his face became a little red. He took a step forward and said, "I am not asking you to do anything excessive, it is just, at this point, he was momentarily speechless, as if he did not know how to continue. Lu Chen picked up where he left off and said, "Don't do anything out of line. Don't do things that you cannot accept or other things that you barbarians cannot stand." Huiyan clenched his teeth and said in a deep voice, "The rules of the wilderness must be followed by every barbarian. But I am not a barbarian." The two people looked at each other, their eyes bright and sharp like blades, and there seemed to be sparks flying in the snow-white light. However, since ancient times, the truth that silence could not solve all problems was the first to come true. After a while, Huiyan said, "Then what do you want to do? I can't really let you lead the Black Fire tribe to an irreversible situation." Lu Chen said, "I also don't know what I want to do, but you have to understand that I don't know what the Black Fire tribe needs to do to rise again, and what it needs to face. But..." He fixed his eyes on Huiyan, and suddenly laughed. He then said calmly, "Actually, I have a question that I want to ask you." "What?" "You're the most powerful barbarian I've ever seen since I came to the southern wilderness. Your insight and decisiveness are outstanding. But from your perspective, if everything goes according to the rules you've mentioned, and you don't do anything out of line, even if your tribe adds a normal priest, what are the chances of the Black Fire tribe truly reviving and returning to its former glory? Huiyan's body suddenly trembled, as if he had been shocked by an electric shock. Then he fell into silence again. After a long time, his voice seemed to be unusually stiff, but he still gritted his teeth and said bit by bit, "Impossible, it's too difficult. It's fine if the other tribes don't have priests, but the tribes with priests are already very powerful, almost no weaker than our Black Fire. Even if you're a little more powerful than ordinary priests because of the gift from the fire god, there are still the most powerful tribes in the wilderness further away, and there are also the few shamans." When the word shaman came out of Huiyan's mouth, Lu Chen saw fear and reverence in his eyes. Perhaps this was the natural belief of all barbarians in the wilderness. Then, Lu Chen laughed. He walked over and gently patted the tall and burly barbarian's shoulder. He said in a gentle tone, "Since it's like this, why don't you let me try? Although it's still very difficult, what if there's a little hope of success? You see, after all, our wishes are the same. You want the tribe to be strong, and I want to return to the north. Even if there are some unusual places along the way, it's not important, right? What do you think?" Lu Chen said to Huiyan with a smile. Huiyan was silent for a long time. A variety of complicated expressions flashed across his face. But in the end, he finally nodded slowly and heavily. "You are right," he said in a low voice. Chapter 308. This underground altar, which had been burning and rumbling in the depths of the earth and had not been known to outsiders for many years, seemed to have long been in ruins. Although the surrounding lava river was very grand, but the things on the black boulder had long been mottled and peeled off over the years. There were cracks all over the 5 black stone pillars, and there were even gaps in many places. Other than that, Lu Chen didn't see anything like the legendary fire god statue on the black boulder. It was called an altar, but there wasn't even a statue of the god. This seemed a little unusual, or perhaps the customs of the barbarians were different from those of the northern human race? Lu Chen asked Huiyan this question in his heart, but Huiyan did not know. He only said that when he came here, the fire god altar was already like this. But at the same time, Huiyan confidently told Lu Chen that there was not much difference between the barbarians and the human race when it came to worshipping the gods. It could even be said that most of the time, the barbarians actually respected and worshipped the gods more than the human race, so their ceremonies were more solemn. Usually, on an altar, there would be a statue of a deity that was enshrined. At this point, Huiyan's expression became a little strange, and he looked at Lu Chen. Lu Chen said helplessly, "Or was it passed down from the earliest ancestors of your Black Fire tribe?" "Yes." Lu Chen thought for a moment and said, "Then in your tribe, what does the supreme fire god look like?" Huiyan's face immediately revealed a look of reverence. He gestured in the air with his hand and said, "It is a gigantic ball of scorching flames. It is the first ball of fire that was born at the beginning of the world, the ancestor of all flames." Lu Chen frowned, and asked, "It is a flame?" Huiyan nodded his head heavily. Suddenly, as if he had come to a sudden realization, he clapped his hands together and said excitedly, "I know. This place is filled with lava and raging flames, like a disaster. Flames are everywhere, isn't this the incarnation of the fire god? It is basically omnipresent, so why bother to erect a statue of a god?" As soon as he finished speaking, Huiyan's face was filled with excitement. Waving his hand at Lu Chen, he quickly walked to the center of the 5 black pillars and knelt down. Lu Chen walked over slowly, but his eyes were constantly looking around. As far as he was concerned, he still had some doubts about the existence of the fire god. Naturally, he did not have any faith or reverence. When he walked to the center of the altar, he did not even have the intention to kneel. However, this was not an ordinary place after all. It was a place where gods were worshipped. In addition, the Black Fire tribe was once powerful for a period of time, and even had many powerful shamans. Therefore, Lu Chen had to be careful in secret. Huiyan kowtowed a few times on the ground, praying and chanting. But after waiting for a while, he found that there was no movement in the surroundings. He hurriedly looked back, and his face was filled with anger and anxiety. He reached out and pulled on Lu Chen's clothes, and said in a low voice, "Quickly kneel down and worship the fire god." Lu Chen was speechless. Just as he was about to retort, he sighed in his heart when he saw Huiyan's expression. In the end, he still knelt down and imitated Huiyan's previous actions. He actually began to kowtow. He was a shadow that had lived in the darkness since he was young. Apart from the agreement he had with Lord Tianlan in the depths of his heart, Lu Chen did not have much faith in the first half of his life. Or it could be said that Lu Chen was actually not sure whether there were gods in this world. Since he had no faith, he naturally did not have any persistence. In the past, when he was a spy in the evil cult, he had knelt many times, including to his master and the evil cult's god. Apart from the devoutness on the surface, he had always been sneering in the depths of his heart. He coldly looked at the world, looked at human feelings, looked at all gods and ghosts, and had no faith. On this day, when he knelt down in front of the altar that was surrounded by burning flames, for some reason, Lu Chen suddenly seemed to see through himself. What kind of person was this? He suddenly felt a chill in his heart, and there was some confusion in the depths of his eyes. The same resolute and devoutness of faith that had deceived the world's most cunning and treacherous evil cult members 10 years ago, right now, in front of a barbarian like Huiyan, Lu Chen's performance could be said to be flawless. Even Lu Chen's performance was too perfect, and even Huiyan himself was stunned. He did not dare to believe it. Not long ago, this person was still suspicious of the fire god, but right now, he had suddenly become so devout. The change was really too great. But no matter what, this was the time to worship the god at the fire god altar. Devoutness was much better than arrogance and rudeness. Therefore, Huiyan felt even more gratified, turned around and continued to kowtow. The two of them faced the empty fire god altar and worshipped for a long time. The surrounding magma surged and flowed, and there were 5 black stone pillars standing majestically, but other than that, there was no other movement. Huiyan raised his head in puzzlement, and looked around. At the same time, Lu Chen's voice came from behind, asking, "When you came here to worship before, was it also like this?" Huiyan hesitated for a moment, and said, "Yes. Because our ancestors said, the fire god has always only responded to the prayers of priests or shamans. No matter how devout we barbarian warriors are, because we don't have that spiritual power, the fire god will not pay attention to us." As he said this, his eyebrows slightly raised, and he looked at Lu Chen, saying, "You have the spiritual power of the fire god in your body, the same origin and the same kind. If you are really our priest, the fire god will definitely respond to you." At this moment, there was already some sharpness within Huiyan's eyes. However, Lu Chen did not panic. After musing for a moment, he stood up and extended his hand to touch his chest. A faint light flashed and the half of the fire god's staff once again appeared in his hand. Seeing the appearance of the fire god's staff, Huiyan's face suddenly showed some excitement, and he stood up immediately. Lu Chen waved his hand at him, indicating that he should not be excited. At the same time, he stood to the side, and then walked alone to the center of the 5 black stone pillars. He looked around with a solemn expression, but in his heart, he sneered. Then, he suddenly raised the half of the fire god's staff high above his head, and both of his hands tightly grasped the staff. At the same time, he seemed to be mumbling something, but in reality, he was just randomly humming a few times. But unexpectedly, in his eyes, a black flame suddenly appeared, and a dark and powerful aura suddenly gushed out from his body. With a "hoo" sound, the black flame emerged from Lu Chen's body, swaying and dancing wildly, burning, but completely ignoring his clothes. And almost at the same time, the fire god's staff in Lu Chen's hands suddenly lit up. The light was dazzling, as if a scorching sun had suddenly lit up in the depths of the earth, emitting a radiance that was tens of thousands of feet long. All kinds of twisted, strange runes flashed and lit up on the fire god's staff. A majestic and ancient aura, far more majestic than before, suddenly emitted from the ancient staff. Huiyan, who was standing outside of the 5 black stone pillars, for a moment could not look directly at the dazzling light, and subconsciously used his hands to cover his eyes. But after a moment, he suddenly heard a deafening roar coming from behind him. At the same time, the huge black stone under his feet also began to shake and tremble. His footing was unstable, and the sky and earth were spinning. The tens of thousands of feet of light were dazzling, and there was even the sound of a surging tide. It was as if the depths of the earth had suddenly boiled. When Huiyan turned around in shock, he saw that in this huge underground cavern, the lava river that originally seemed to have calmly flowed for thousands of years, had completely changed. The scorching and terrifying red lava roared and roared, as if it was boiling. Wave after wave surged up, the waves rising higher and higher, and gradually began to overflow the black stones, submerging them one by one. The huge black stone where the fire god altar was located was the highest point, but countless amounts of lava rushed over from all directions, crazily hitting the huge stone. The huge black stone began to shake violently. Huiyan stood on top, almost unable to stand steadily. His entire face was pale with fright. Behind him, the person holding the fire god's staff seemed to be oblivious to the increasingly dangerous situation outside, as if a disaster was about to befall them. He only held the staff in his hand, looking up at the sky. In the depths of the brilliance, under the shadow of the strong light, at that moment, Lu Chen's mind suddenly recalled that day in the wilderness of the land of chaos, the last words of the dying old barbarian priest. Bring the fire god's staff back to the southern wilderness, bring it back to the fire god altar, bring it back to the fire god's side. He originally thought that this was the most ridiculous thing in the world, and also the most impossible thing to achieve. But in the unseen world, after a few turns, he suddenly discovered that he was actually standing here. Could it be that there really was a deity in this world, that the fire god really existed? He stared at the depths of the distant shadow outside the brilliant flames, remained silent, and then suddenly raised the fire god's staff, heavily knocked on the huge black stone, right in the middle of the altar. Boom! The entire underground cave instantly shook, all the lava in that instant soared into the sky, a terrifying and suffocating scorching feeling was about to drown everything, until a beam of light shone in from the side of the huge black stone. Under the huge lava whirlpool, a ray of brilliance rose up, a magnificent roar resounded throughout the underground, like an ancient elegy recounting the sad past. In the depths of the brilliance, half of the staff was surrounded by raging flames, burning, emitting thousands of rays of brilliance. It curled up from the lava whirlpool, rose all the way to the peak of the lava, and then flew towards the fire god altar. Lu Chen silently looked at the flying staff, suddenly threw out the half of the fire god's staff in his hand. The two staffs converged in mid-air with a loud bang, the fiery lights suddenly flourished, magma danced wildly all around, crazily surging up to the dome, but only the huge rock of the altar was not tainted in the slightest. After a moment, the light dissipated, the two staffs in mid-air had already converged into one, and then flew downwards. A buzzing sound was heard, directly piercing into the incomparably hard black stone. Chapter 309. After an unknown number of years, they once again merged into one, forming a complete fire god staff. It was calmly inserted into the black boulder. The black boulder that could withstand the terrifying heat was easily pierced through like tofu in front of the fire god staff. Lu Chen took 2 steps back, then glanced at Huiyan who was standing at the side. He saw that this barbarian's face was filled with excitement. All the doubts, worries, and hesitation that he once had, were now completely gone. In this ancient holy land, the god of fire had once again proven to him that he was not wrong about him. This human was indeed the messenger that the fire god had specially chosen. He carried the will of the fire god, and together with the Black Fire tribe, he would bear the heavy responsibility of reviving the tribe. At this moment, he felt Lu Chen's gaze on him, and also looked at him. At the same time, he nodded excitedly, as if he did not know what to say. Lu Chen walked to his side, and softly said, it has never been like this before? Huiyan said, yes, it has been a few generations, a few hundred years, and the fire god has never responded to us like this on the altar. Lu Chen looked around, and saw that with the revival of the fire god's staff, the surging and roaring magma had already begun to calm down, returning to its original state of slow flowing. However, on the many black boulders, one could still clearly see the traces of the previous crazy burn. Those ghastly scars were like the angry roars of a god, causing people to tremble just by looking at them. Lu Chen said to Huiyan, the fire god's staff has been revived. Don't you want to go and worship it, or pick it up to take a look? Huiyan was silent for a moment, then he firmly shook his head and said, there's no need. This is a divine weapon that the fire god bestowed upon you. It's useless for me to take it. A divine weapon, huh? Lu Chen smiled faintly and walked to the front of the fire god's staff. He stretched out his hand and held the staff. His eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at the fire god's staff that seemed to be flowing with brilliance and had an extraordinary aura. After a moment, he didn't seem to use much strength. It was as if he had just raised his arm slightly, and the fire god's staff rose from the ground. All sorts of brilliance flowed and flickered, and then slowly settled down. Finally, all of it retracted back into the staff and disappeared, turning the fire god's staff back into a seemingly ordinary staff. A strange and subtle aura came from where Lu Chen was holding the divine staff, echoing in his mind. Scenes that seemed like ancient poems or scenes from the past appeared one by one. His vision suddenly darkened. At that moment, it was as if Lu Chen's entire body had suddenly lost all weight. His entire body floated up, as if he was in an endless darkness. Then he raised his head and lowered his head. In front of him and behind him, countless stars lit up, layer upon layer, endless. There was a delicate incantation that came from the depths of this empty starry sky. It drilled into his mind and turned into strange characters that were engraved in his heart. It was as if the eyes of the gods were looking at him, and the magnificent and great Sanskrit was faintly humming. There was the light of a flame burning, rapid and grand. In an instant, it burned through the starry sky and swallowed everything, no matter if it was light or darkness. Therefore, there was only raging fire left in the void. Everywhere was a sea of fire. The flames surrounded Lu Chen's body. It was as if there were countless arms tearing at his body, wanting to tear him into pieces. A terrifying pain suddenly rose up. There was actually a sense of familiarity. It was the pain of the curse that had entangled him for the past 10 years. And in the depths of the flames in front of him, there was a huge screen of flames that suddenly rose up. There was a terrifying mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, from ancient times to the present, from the sky to the earth. Boom! Suddenly, a loud sound exploded like thunder from a clear sky. It caused Lu Chen, who was in a daze, to suddenly wake up. When he turned to look, he saw that Huiyan's face was filled with shock. Huiyan's hands were tightly hugging Lu Chen's body. Lu Chen did not know when, but he was already standing at the edge of the huge black rock. Half of his foot had already stepped out and was suspended above the magma outside. If he took another step, he would be consigned to eternal damnation and die without a complete corpse. Huiyan roared angrily. He dragged Lu Chen a few steps back, away from the frightening edge of the black rock. Perhaps because they were too agitated and used too much force, the two of them even fell to the ground together. What's wrong with you? Huiyan leapt up and glared at Lu Chen as he roared. Lu Chen was silent for a moment. Then, he slowly stood up. His gaze swept across the fire god's staff that was still in his hand. After a while, he briefly described to Huiyan the scene he had just seen. Then, he asked, probably. I saw the fire god that you revere? Huiyan's body shook violently. An expression of disbelief appeared on his face. But soon after, he seemed to have thought of something and silently nodded his head. There was an excited expression on his face. Is it because the fire god's power is too great that you can't control it for a while? Huiyan probed. Lu Chen recalled the scene he had just experienced. It actually somewhat overlapped with a certain scene in the depths of his memory. This caused him to subconsciously stretch out his hand to touch his chest. After a moment of silence, he said to Huiyan, "When your Black Fire tribe still had priests, was the so-called inheritance of law and power all like this?" Huiyan immediately shook his head. He seemed very certain as he said, "No. Although our tribe hasn't had a priest for many years, I have long heard of what happened in the past from my father. When the priests were still in our tribe, every generation of priests were directly taught by the shaman or priest of the previous generation. Except..." At this point, his expression suddenly changed. Lu Chen immediately sensed the change in Huiyan's expression. He asked, "Except what?" The excitement on Huiyan's face faded slightly. There seemed to be a little more surprise and doubt. When he looked at Lu Chen again, there were some complicated emotions in his eyes. He said, "Except in the legends, our tribe's first-generation shaman ancestor, we call him the Great Shaman. It is said that the Great Shaman was the first barbarian to comprehend the power of the fire god. Only he was able to directly obtain the spiritual power of the fire god in the Sea of Fire." He glanced at Lu Chen. After gritting his teeth, he said, "Just like you did today. Let's go." Lu Chen said to Huiyan. Huiyan agreed. Just as he was about to turn around, he turned his head worriedly to look at Lu Chen. With a trace of nervousness, he said to Lu Chen, "Did you really comprehend the power of the fire god?" Lu Chen smiled. "I also don't know how strong its power is, so I can't say for sure. But from the looks of it, it should be okay, especially when I have this fire god staff." Huiyan looked at him with some doubt. But he didn't ask much. After all, there was still a long way to go. He turned around to go back the way he came. "Wait a minute." Lu Chen stopped him. "Let's go another way." "Another way?" Huiyan was stunned. Lu Chen took 2 steps forward. His face was calm. His eyes gazed at the sea of magma in front of him. Suddenly, he raised the fire god's staff with both hands, drew it in the air, and pointed it forward. In the huge cavern, there was a sudden gust of wind. The whistling sound circled around Lu Chen. Light flashed from the fire god's staff. After a moment, an ancient, powerful, vast and boundless aura emitted from Lu Chen's body. The flowing magma suddenly sped up, as if it had suddenly become agitated. And under the magma, there was a rumbling sound, as if the earth was shaking. Not long after, there was suddenly a loud sound. Amidst the rumbling sound, a cluster of black rose from the scarlet magma. It was the black stones that were similar to the surroundings. Following that, more and more black stones rose. The magma was like a raging beast, roaring and roaring continuously. However, it could not stop the black stones that rose abruptly from biting and joining together, forming a black bridge that spanned across the entire sea of magma and fire. When everything calmed down again, Lu Chen and Huiyan stood on this newly appeared bridge that seemed to still have the scorching aura of the magma below. Remnants of fire could be seen everywhere on the bridge. They looked at each other. Then, Huiyan nodded. Lu Chen smiled and walked forward. At the same time, he said, "Let's go from here, a new path." Chapter 310. As they walked out of the underground cavern, Atsu came up to greet them. This black wolf seemed to have sensed something and kept staring at Lu Chen. But other than that, Atsu didn't do anything else. It didn't roar, but just quietly followed behind Lu Chen, all the way back to the surface. They didn't know how long they stayed underground. When they returned to the Black Stone Canyon, the sky was dark. It was already late at night. In the vast night sky, countless stars twinkled, like pearls decorating the deep sky. Under the starry sky, the mountains and the earth seemed to become insignificant. Those who looked up at the starry sky seemed to feel like they were just a speck of dust. Under the starry sky, in the night wind, they gazed into the distance for a long time. The wind faintly carried their soft and indistinct voices, as if they were discussing something. Maybe it was the heaven and earth, or maybe it was the past, or maybe it was the future hope of this path. Afterwards, they turned around and left this place, causing this originally desolate gorge to once again sink into silence. Only the cold starlight lingered in this place, unwilling to give up. On the way back, Hui Yan and Lu Chen were extremely careful. However, compared to their previous journey, their journey this time seemed to be smoother. Not only did they rarely encounter any powerful demonic beasts, they didn't even encounter any powerful clans or tribes. As for the incomparably powerful Thunder Cloud tribe that unexpectedly appeared near the northern border, it seemed to have already left this place, relieving them of one of their biggest worries. In Lu Chen's eyes, this was really good luck. In Hui Yan's eyes, this was the blessing of the fire god. Because of all these reasons, they returned almost 2 days earlier than expected. They arrived near the Black Fire tribe's camp that day. This was originally a comfortable and happy journey, until they saw a few plumes of black smoke rising from the Black Fire tribe's camp. Atsu suddenly roared towards the front, the hair on its neck stood up, and its eyes revealed a fierce light. Hui Yan and Lu Chen's expressions changed almost at the same time. Hui Yan roared angrily and rushed forward. At the same time, a trace of fear faintly appeared on his face. Lu Chen followed behind the furious barbarian warrior. His eyebrows were tightly knitted, and his mood was indescribably complicated. Of course, he didn't have the same deep feelings for the Black Fire tribe as Hui Yan did. To be honest, if it wasn't for the secret of returning north from Hui Yan, he really wouldn't care if this damn tribe was dead or alive, or if it was thriving or declining. But now that they had boarded the pirate ship, Lu Chen of course hoped that the Black Fire tribe would have better luck. At this moment, Lu Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the murderous black smoke in front of him. Reviving the Black Fire tribe was an extremely difficult mission. If the Black Fire tribe was destroyed before he took over, that would truly make him want to cry, but no tears would come out. It was obvious that Hui Yan had also thought of this. His worry for the tribe drove him to the brink of insanity in his anger and fear. He roared as he rushed forward. Lu Chen, on the other hand, was much calmer as he followed behind him. His gaze swept across the surrounding desert, carefully observing the movements behind the sand dune plants. They rushed all the way into the Black Fire tribe's camp. Along the way, the two did not meet with any obstructions or enemies. But the scene that greeted them caused Hui Yan to stop in his tracks and hold his breath. The huge camp of the tribe was in a complete mess. Many houses had collapsed. Traces of fighting and burning could be seen everywhere. In the ruins of the village, among the rocks and charred firewood, the corpses of barbarians could be seen lying motionless on the ground from time to time. The smell of blood drifted from the front along with the wind. Hui Yan suddenly let out an inhuman howl of pain, like a despairing demonic beast in a hopeless situation. A trickle of blood flowed from the side of his mouth. He had bitten his lips. At that moment, his eyes were filled with regret, and his body was trembling slightly. With a thud, he finally knelt on the ground. He clenched his fists and pounded the ground in front of him with all his might, as if he had gone mad. But at this moment, a hand suddenly reached out from the side and pulled him back. Hui Yan's body stopped, and he raised his head to look with a pair of bloodshot and furious eyes. It was Lu Chen who had come to his side. Hui Yan stared at Lu Chen, his eyes burning with a flame that could kill him. But Lu Chen didn't seem to notice it. His face was calm as usual, as if the tragic scene around him had no meaning to him. He just lowered his body slightly and said to Hui Yan in a low voice, "There are too few corpses. Your tribe has far more people than this." Hui Yan's body shook, as if he had suddenly woken up. The expression in his eyes quickly calmed down. After a while, he nodded to Lu Chen, gritted his teeth and stood up. He then quickly walked into the depths of the camp and began to examine the surrounding situation. He dragged out the barbarian corpses from the ruins and placed them in an open space. About an hour later, the two of them had searched the entire Black Fire tribe's camp. Then, They dragged out the corpses and placed them in the open space in the middle of the camp. There were a total of 11 corpses. Among the 11 corpses, 3 or 4 of them had been badly burned and their faces could no longer be seen clearly. The remaining corpses were obviously old men or women. There was not a single one of the young, strong, and ferocious barbarian warriors of the Black Fire tribe. Hui Yan and Lu Chen stood side by side next to the 11 corpses. Atsu did not seem to like the scene here. He ran to the sandy ground outside the camp and lay down. A mournful wind blew from the wilderness from afar. Lu Chen turned his head to look at Hui Yan. When the wind ruffled the hair of this brave and burly barbarian, Lu Chen saw that there was still pain and regret in his eyes. But at the same time, it was obvious that he was relieved. These people are all my tribesmen. Hui Yan's voice sounded very low, but very clear. 8 old men and 3 women. I can call out their names. As he said this, he pointed at the corpses, pressed his hand on his chest, and lowered his head in silence. Lu Chen waited for a while, then calmly said, "From the situation here, it is very likely that the Black Fire tribe was ambushed by external enemies. But from the corpses, it should be the warriors of your tribe who escorted most of your tribesmen out of here." Here, he paused and said, "We are going to look for them." Hui Yan glanced at him and said, "Why can't it be another tribe who ambushed and defeated our tribe, and then abducted all of our people?" Lu Chen shook his head and said, "With your usual vision and calmness, there is no way that you can't figure out the reason behind this. You are just confused now. The warriors of the Black Fire tribe are brave and valiant. At least in my opinion, there is no one who is afraid of death. If it really came to that, the number of corpses here today would be 10 times more." Hui Yan closed his eyes and was silent for a long time. Then he let out a long breath and said, "You are right." He stared at Lu Chen and said in a low voice, "It seems that I was right to ask you to be the priest." Lu Chen smiled and said, "I said, these are not difficult things to hide. If it were you, you would be able to see it too. It is just that you are too worried now." Hui Yan clenched his fist tightly and looked at the corpses on the ground. He silently lowered his head and said a few words, then suddenly turned and walked out of the camp. At the same time, he said, "Let's go, we will go after them." Lu Chen followed. At this moment, Atsu, who was outside the camp, suddenly stood up. After stretching his body, he suddenly faced the vast sky and let out a long howl. The mournful howl of the wolf echoed in this cold and desolate wasteland. Chapter 311. As they walked out of the camp, Hui Yan asked Lu Chen if there was any way to find the missing tribesmen through witchcraft. Lu Chen naturally shook his head and denied it. At the same time, he had a new understanding of the unfathomable superstition of witchcraft of these barbarians. However, it seemed that Hui Yan did not have much hope in this matter. He was just hoping for a fluke. After receiving Lu Chen's reply, he frowned and observed the surroundings. After a moment of contemplation, he led Lu Chen in a certain direction. "Do you have an idea?" Lu Chen was a little surprised, and asked beside him. Hui Yan wanted to say something but stopped. He smiled bitterly and said, "It's not easy to survive in the northern part of the wilderness. Normally, every tribe would leave a way out for themselves. There's such a place in front of us. Let's go and take a look first." Lu Chen nodded and felt a little relieved. Since there was such a way out, it was highly likely that most of the Black Fire tribe had escaped. Although he did not have any deep feelings for this tribe, he still hoped that the Black Fire tribe would be well. Otherwise, it would be really embarrassing for the entire tribe to be exterminated right after they accepted the fire god's gift to become the tribe's priest. Not thinking about this matter any longer, Lu Chen quickly thought of another important question. He glanced at Hui Yan and said in a low voice, "Can you tell who the enemy was?" Hui Yan's body paused for a moment. A trace of anger flashed across his eyes, but he shook his head. However, after a moment of silence, Hui Yan said, "It's none other than the other tribes in this land." The thunder lizard, the divine wood, the ghost fox, and the mountain spirit tribe that we defeated a few days ago. Lu Chen frowned and said, the mountain spirit tribe suffered heavy losses that day and their priest died. I don't think it's possible. But let's not talk about whether they have the ability or not. At the very least, it makes sense that the mountain spirit tribe would come back for revenge. But you don't trust the 3 tribes that fought with the mountain spirit tribe that day? Hui Yan coldly laughed. His face was cold as he said, we're all living in this barren land. Who can trust anyone else? If there's a chance, I won't hesitate to stab someone in the back. Lu Chen looked at him deeply, then nodded and said, I see. On the way to the secret hiding place of the Black Fire tribe, Hui Yan, who had gradually calmed down, introduced the situation of the land where the Black Fire tribe was located to Lu Chen, the future priest of the Black Fire tribe. Just as he had said before, because this was the most desolate and harsh place in the southern wilderness, the relationship between the few tribes living here was very subtle. Conflicts between the tribes would occur from time to time. Including the original mountain spirit tribe, among the 5 tribes here, the Black Fire tribe had always been in the middle position. It wasn't the strongest, but it wasn't the weakest either. But compared to the glorious history of many years ago, the current Black Fire tribe was, of course, extremely unworthy. This made Hui Yan, a barbarian who cherished his ancestors, feel depressed and humiliated. Among the 5 tribes, there were strong and weak ones, but overall, there wasn't much of a difference. Otherwise, if a tribe was really weak, it would have long been swallowed up by others. And if a tribe suddenly became strong, like the mountain spirit tribe not long ago, then the other tribes would band together and attack it. It could be considered a strange and dangerous balance. Lu Chen asked about the situation in detail and then became thoughtful along the way. The 2 of them walked with the Atsu tribe. After about half a day's journey, they arrived at a rare oasis in the desert. But this oasis looked very small. There wasn't much water, and the surrounding forest didn't look very lush, as if it could dry up at any time. There was no one around this small oasis. Occasionally, they would see 1 or 2 lone monsters running from the desert in the distance. They were probably there to drink a few mouthfuls of water. Lu Chen looked at the oasis with some doubt. No matter how he looked at it, although this small oasis could provide some water, it didn't seem like a place that could hide such a large population of the Black Fire tribe. Sure enough, Hui Yan didn't walk directly into the small oasis. Instead, he circled around and walked to the back of the oasis. There were 5 or 6 connected sand dunes there, looking like an uneven sand wall. There were also some protruding rocks buried in the sand, only a small part of them exposed on the ground. Lu Chen followed Hui Yan to the back of the sand dunes and watched him walk all the way to a large rock at the back of the sand dunes. Hui Yan stuck his left hand into the sand and pulled it open. There was a soft rustling sound as the sand flowed. At the same time, a stone slab was pushed open, revealing a black hole. Lu Chen unconsciously took a step forward. At the same time, he cursed in his heart. Did the Black Fire tribe worship the god of fire or the god of earth? Why do they like to dig holes in the ground every day? Looking at the pitch-black cave entrance, before they could even make a move, they heard a few angry curses coming from inside the cave. A few cold lights flashed, and a moment later, 2 figures jumped out, roaring angrily as they slashed at Hui Yan and Lu Chen. Lu Chen took 2 steps back and let them go. He didn't have any intention of fighting back. With Hui Yan around, this kind of thing would naturally be easily settled. Sure enough, Hui Yan dodged the chopping axe and shouted, "Stop, it's me." The 2 barbarian warriors, who were originally full of murderous intent, trembled when they heard this. Then, their eyes revealed a look of surprise as they looked at Hui Yan. They shouted in unison and almost simultaneously rushed forward, hugging Hui Yan and shouting a few words. Their expressions were extremely excited. Hui Yan was also very happy. After all, he didn't come empty-handed. Since there were people here, it was very likely that the other tribesmen were here as well. Even so, he still had to ask them personally. Huiyan grabbed a barbarian beside him and asked anxiously, "Black Bull, what about the others? Are they all right?" The barbarian warrior called Black Bull nodded repeatedly and pointed to the hole. "The tribesmen are hiding in there. They're fine for the time being." As he said this, a trace of sadness flashed across his face. "But at the camp, we didn't have time to save them. A few of them died. I'm sorry, Huiyan. When you weren't here, we didn't protect the tribe well." Huiyan patted Black Bull's shoulder and said in a deep voice, "It's not your fault. Come, bring me in to have a look." The Black Bull hurriedly agreed. Just as he took a step forward, a startled expression suddenly appeared on his face. Only at this moment did he see Lu Chen and Atu standing to the side. Furthermore, he saw Lu Chen's extremely calm expression as he leisurely walked over and walked shoulder to shoulder with Huiyan towards the cave entrance. In Lu Chen's hand, the fire god's staff, which was half its original length and had become complete, was in his hand. Just as Black Bull was in a daze, a voice suddenly came from the front. It wasn't Huiyan's, but the human male. He asked Black Bull, "Do you know who the enemy who launched a sneak attack on the tribe is?" Black Bull opened his mouth but didn't say anything. His expression was a little strange. But at the same time, Huiyan's dignified voice came again. "Speak. Lu Chen is now the priest of our Black Fire tribe. He's the messenger sent by the Supreme Fire God. Messenger of the Fire God. Priest." The two barbarian warriors, including Black Bull, were immediately stunned. They didn't dare to believe it, but Huiyan's prestige was extremely high, so they didn't dare to question him. They could only follow behind him with strange expressions on their faces. Only when Lu Chen asked again did they wake up as if they had just woken up from a dream. They replied, "It was done by the Divine Wood tribe." Chapter 312. Divine Wood Tribe? Huiyan and Lu Chen glanced at each other, but didn't say anything. The two walked into the cave, and after passing through a narrow passageway, the front suddenly opened up to reveal an extremely spacious cave. At the same time, there were several torches lit, but it didn't make people feel suffocated. It was obvious that there was another unobstructed vent. Most of the people of the Black Fire tribe were gathered here. Hearing the sound of footsteps, someone turned around and immediately saw the tall and sturdy Huiyan, and immediately cried out in surprise. This movement quickly alerted the other people, especially those tall and strong barbarian warriors in the crowd. They gathered around Yishuan one after another. Their faces were filled with pleasant surprise. Huiyan walked over, bumping chests and clapping with these warriors. His voice was deep and powerful, and the surrounding people all showed their respect and submission to him. Lu Chen clearly saw this from the side, and could feel that Huiyan indeed had great prestige in this tribe. Previously, when the Black Fire tribe was ambushed by the Divine Wood tribe, although they suffered a great loss and even lost their camp, on the way back, the tribe's vitality was not damaged, and the elite warriors were almost all alive. In this kind of situation, if Huiyan was also in the tribe, with his command, it would be hard to say who would win or lose. It was clear that Lu Chen was not the only one who had such thoughts. Many of the barbarian warriors had also mentioned this matter to Huiyan when he walked past them. Their faces were filled with anger and unwillingness. Huiyan silently nodded, but didn't say anything, and just continued walking forward. And Lu Chen, who had been following behind Huiyan, also attracted many strange gazes. But after the previous incident at the Black Fire tribe's camp, these barbarians looked at Lu Chen with a much more relaxed gaze. Walking through the crowd and into the depths of the cave, he saw two people coming from behind the crowd. They were Huiyan's two relatives. His son, Huiying, was supporting the current chief of the Black Fire tribe, who was also his father, Huahu. "Father." Huiyan walked in front of Huahu and called out. Flaming Tiger looked at his son, and a trace of gratification flashed across his face. He nodded and said, "It's good that you're back." As he spoke, his gaze swept past Huiyan's back. When he saw Lu Chen and the intact fire god's staff in his hand, he seemed to be startled for a moment. At the same time, a haze flashed across the depths of his eyes. Hui Yan's return made the people of the Black Fire tribe happy and excited. The atmosphere in the tribe was obviously much higher. Many people cast their gazes over. Although they didn't shout or shout, there was still a very strong and obvious expectation. As for what this expectation was, it was self-evident. However, no matter what it was, the core members of the clan had to sit down and discuss it. Basically, it was Hui Yan's family. As one of the privileges of the patriarch, Flaming Tiger occupied the best and driest place in this underground cave. The people around him automatically moved aside, and with the help of the Fire Hawk, Flaming Tiger sat down again. He seemed to be panting a little. Hui Yan frowned and also sat down in front of the two of them. He looked at his father with a trace of worry on his face and said, "Father, are you all right?" Flaming Tiger forced a smile and said, "That day when we were running for our lives, I was tired for a while. I'm much better now." Then, his gaze turned to the person beside Hui Yan. As if he didn't care about the surprised and complicated gazes of the surrounding Black Fire tribe members, he directly sat down beside Hui Yan and openly joined the discussion of the highest core members of the Black Fire tribe, Lu Chen. Flaming Tiger's expression was a little unhappy, but Hui Yan seemed to ignore it. Moreover, he felt that Lu Chen sitting down was a matter of course. However, this infuriated another hot-tempered youth. Flaming Eagle stood up and said angrily, "What right does this damned human have to sit here? Do you believe that I won't kill you with one strike?" Lu Chen's expression was indifferent. There was no joy or sorrow on his face. He only glanced at the angry brute youth and didn't say anything. Meanwhile, Hui Yan, who was sitting beside Lu Chen, said in a low voice, "Flaming Eagle, sit down." Flaming Eagle seemed to be somewhat afraid of his father. Although his anger didn't decrease after hearing this, he still sat down hatefully. However, he still stayed close to his grandfather, Flaming Tiger, and faintly felt that he was confronting his father, Hui Yan. Flaming Tiger looked coldly at the two people in front of him. A barbarian and a human, just sitting together like this, as if there was no gap between them, and their calm and composed appearance made him feel that it was particularly irritating. He looked at Hui Yan and said, "What's going on? Tell me." Hui Yan didn't beat around the bush and said straightforwardly, "These days, I brought Lu Chen to the fire god's altar. In the holy land of the altar, Lu Chen has already received the recognition and blessing of the fire god, and obtained the great power of the god's inheritance. Now, he is the priest of our Black Fire tribe, and in the future, he will guide our tribe to rise and become strong again." He didn't deliberately lower his voice. When he said these words in a loud and clear voice, apart from Flaming Tiger and Flaming Eagle, many of the surrounding barbarians of the Black Fire tribe who were paying attention to what was happening heard at the same time. Suddenly, there was an uproar. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment, and it was obvious that they couldn't accept this result for a moment. Impossible. Flaming Eagle was the first to roar, and once again stood up suddenly. Hui Yan also stood up, but he didn't make any move against his son in front of him. He only glanced at him, and then turned around to look at the surroundings. Facing the gazes of the many clansmen, he said in a clear voice, "The long-lost divine weapon, the fire god's staff, has now been reunited in the hands of Lu Chen. This is the best proof that the fire god has recognized him." There was another round of clamor and discussion, but it quickly quieted down. Most of the Black Fire clansmen still had expressions of shock and disbelief on their faces, but when they looked at Lu Chen, there was an inexplicable sense of intimacy in their gazes. Is that the person chosen by the Supreme Fire God? As if responding to Hui Yan's words, the Fire God's scepter suddenly flickered and brightened. A dazzling brilliance lit up from the scepter. It was as dazzling as the sun, causing one to feel reverence when looking at it. After a while, suddenly from the dazzling brilliance, a ball of flames suddenly soared up, rushed into the air, burned fiercely. The entire cave people felt a wave of heat instantly hit their faces, and the ancient aura contained in it, was even more powerful to the point that it made people tremble. In an instant, under the deep-rooted worship and reverence, almost all of the Black Fire tribe members knelt down. Their eyes were brimming with tears, and they bowed respectfully, cheering and praising the fire god. Huahu and Huaying, on the other hand, had expressions of shock on their faces. They did not kneel down, but neither did they reprimand him. On the contrary, Huayan, who was standing at the side, had a strange expression on his face. He looked at the fire god's staff, as if he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. This conversation did not reach any conclusion, and ended because of the fire god's staff's radiance. Although Lu Chen's identity was a little strange, in the Black Fire tribe, the fire god was an overwhelming power, not to mention that he had the support of the tribe's chief warrior, Huayan. It was also from this day onwards that Lu Chen officially made his debut in the Black Fire tribe. However, when they left, Huayan and Lu Chen walked side by side. Taking advantage of the fact that there was no one nearby, Huayan lowered his voice and asked Lu Chen, "I say, among the power passed down by the fire god, isn't the most powerful black fire?" Lu Chen smiled as he looked to his left and right, his expression unchanged. He also lowered his voice and said, "You're right. Then why did you suddenly create that flashy but impractical white light?" "Because this is the best way to deceive these idiots. If you use black fire, they might not even understand," Lu Chen said. Huayan was furious, but then his expression stiffened and he fell silent. After a long while, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. He sighed and did not say anything else. After Huayan returned to the tribe, many people in the Black Fire tribe seemed to have suddenly found a pillar of support, and their spirits rose. This was especially obvious among the barbarian warriors. Many of them could feel it, including the patriarch of the barbarian race, Huahu. And since Huayan had returned, the most important thing was to understand the matter of the Divine Wood tribe's sneak attack, and how to respond. In fact, the most important person to respond to this matter should be the chief, but the atmosphere in the Black Fire tribe seemed to be a little strange. Huayan's question seemed to be a matter of course, and the people beside him did not object. The beginning and the course of this matter were quickly laid out in front of Huayan and Lu Chen. The matter was not complicated. The situation was that one day, the Divine Wood tribe suddenly took advantage of the darkness to launch a sneak attack on the Black Fire camp. There was no warning beforehand, and there was almost no conflict between the two tribes. The people of the Black Fire tribe did not expect the Divine Wood tribe to make such a move, so they were caught unprepared. However, among the 5 tribes of the wasteland, the Black Fire tribe's warriors had always been at the highest level. It was just that the tribe did not have the most people, so their overall strength was only in the middle. The Divine Wood tribe had many people, but the battle strength of their warriors could not compare to that of the Black Fire tribe. So after this battle, although the Black Fire tribe was defeated, their losses were not great. But in the end, they had lost their base, and it was still a very embarrassing matter. Huayan listened to this matter with a sullen face. There were a few tribal warriors who reported this matter, including Iron Bear, whom Lu Chen had seen before, and Black Bull, whom he had seen outside the passage. Seeing how close they were to Huayan, it was obvious that they were Huayan's trusted aides. After listening, Huayan looked at these people with a cold face. These strong barbarian warriors looked at each other, all of them looking a little embarrassed. Huayan snorted coldly and said, "The warriors of the Divine Wood tribe are all trash. You were actually chased here by those trash. After everything was settled, why didn't you rush back and chop them to death?" The abnormally tall and sturdy Iron Bear raised his eyes and said, "We also thought about it." "Oh." It was Lu Chen who interrupted and asked calmly, "From what you're saying, someone stopped you from taking revenge?" Iron Bear curled his lips and glanced at Lu Chen. "That's right." Chapter 313. Huayan naturally didn't take these words seriously when he said that his tribe's warriors had been chased away by trash. It was most likely something he said out of anger. He forgot what he said, so Tai Xiong, Hei Miao, and the others didn't take it to heart. However, Lu Chen's question hit the nail on the head. Hui Yan's expression changed and became ugly. After a while, he said, "What did father say?" When Hui Yan wasn't in the tribe, there was only one person who could stop these hot-blooded, fierce, and brave warriors. There was no need to guess. It could only be the chief, Hua Hu. Tai Xiong and He Miao looked at each other with a strange expression on their faces. Lu Chen looked at them from the side. After a while, He Miao opened his mouth and laughed dryly. The chief said that this matter happened in a hurry and the people's hearts aren't stable. Everything will be discussed after you return. Hui Yan was stunned for a moment. Soon after, an expression that didn't know whether to laugh or cry appeared on his face. In the end, he looked at Lu Chen and said with a bitter smile, "Then I'll go find father to discuss this." Tai Xiong and He Miao turned around and left, leaving only Lu Chen and Hui Yan. Hui Yan looked at Lu Chen and said, "Come with me." Lu Chen said, "Your father and your son don't seem to like me very much. Are you sure you want me to go with you?" Hui Yan hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and said, "You are already our tribe's priest. In the future, there will be a time when we will meet or fight. You might as well take this opportunity to make things clear and avoid future troubles." Lu Chen calmly nodded, as if he didn't care much about this matter. Instead, he looked at Hui Yan and said, "How do you plan to deal with this matter?" "Of course, we will take revenge." Hui Yan said without hesitation, "In the northern wasteland, if you take a step back, others will take a step forward. If you are a bit weaker, others will be more ruthless. Moreover, if we don't do anything, those clansmen who died in the camp will have died in vain." Lu Chen grunted and said, "It's good that you've made up your mind." Hui Yan turned his head to look at him. Seeing that there was no one around, he inched closer without batting an eyelid. "Do you have confidence in this battle?" Lu Chen smiled and said, "If what you said on the way here is true, as long as I go over to help, we will definitely win this battle." Hui Yan was instantly overjoyed, but after the joy, he still did not dare to completely believe it. He said in a low voice, "Really? Why are you so confident?" Lu Chen spat and jokingly scolded, "I don't want to do this job, but you desperately want to drag me down with you. Now that I'm on the pirate ship, I have no choice but to help you, and you still don't believe me? If I say it's possible, then it's definitely possible. What's with all this nonsense?" Hui Yan laughed heartily, his expression carefree and joyful as he strode forward. Lu Chen followed beside him and said, "But how are you so sure that your father will agree to your suggestion?" Hui Yan waved his hand and smiled, "You don't understand. My father handed this matter to me a long time ago." "Oh, that's good," Lu Chen said with a smile. About an hour later, Hui Yan and Lu Chen once again left the residence of the Black Fire tribe's chief, Hua Hu. But this time, the expressions on both of their faces were a little strange. Lu Chen was a little surprised and a little amused, while Hui Yan's face was ashen, looking angry and annoyed. As he walked, the Black Fire tribe's clansmen all avoided him, not daring to provoke this burly chief warrior. When the two of them walked to a secluded area with no one around, Lu Chen said lightly, "What do you mean?" Hui Yan suddenly let out a low roar and suddenly punched the stone wall beside him, causing a large amount of sand to fall. At the same time, he gritted his teeth and said, "Stupid, stupid. How could my father be so stupid? Whether he's stupid or not, there's nothing more to say. Now that the chief doesn't agree to send out troops for revenge, what do you plan to do?" Lu Chen stood beside Hui Yan and said with a calm expression, "By the way, I've always thought that you were the one who could make the final decision in the Black Fire tribe when we made the deal in the sacrificial altar sacred land. With the current situation, even if the two of us have the ability to reach the heavens, if we really want to strengthen the Black Fire tribe, won't we?" Hui Yan snorted and said, "My father has been the chief for many years. He knows all the rules of the wasteland. He must have a reason for doing this." Lu Chen said, "Then what is the reason? Please tell me." Hui Yan was speechless. Lu Chen shrugged and said, "In any case, I'm not in a hurry. Do as you see fit. As he said this, he found a clean spot by the wall and sat down. Black Wolf Atsu, who had always been following him, also laid down beside him. Lu Chen stroked the fur on Atu's head and back, then quickly closed his eyes. Hui Yan stared at him for a while, then suddenly stamped his feet and went back to Hua Hu's residence. In the next 2 hours, many people of the Black Fire tribe heard the fiercest quarrel between the two of them in history. The quarrel was deafening and chaotic. This quarrel suddenly stopped at the last moment. Hui Yan seemed to have reached the limit of his patience. He strode out of the house and shouted at the people around him. Following which, a large group of tribal warriors arrived at Hui Yan's side almost instantaneously, surrounding him. On the other side, Fire Tiger also walked out. However, he looked much older than before. In fact, he looked even older than he was not long ago. This pair of father and son glared angrily at each other. A choice was immediately placed in the hands of all the people of the Black Fire tribe, especially in the hands of the fierce and valiant barbarian warriors. In the end, this quarrel did not really come to a conclusion. Because on that day, when the two of them confronted each other, everyone in the Black Fire tribe saw that almost every barbarian warrior spontaneously stood behind Hui Yan. And on Hua Hu's side, only his grandson, Hui Ying, rushed over and tightly supported his grandfather. Then, with a sad look in his eyes, he wanted to help his grandfather back. Hui Yan stood in the crowd with a similarly ugly expression. There was also a trace of sadness. But he quickly put aside these thoughts and walked to Lu Chen's side. Lu Chen was resting with his eyes closed, but in reality, he was not really asleep. So he quickly stood up and nodded to Hui Yan, saying, "You are probably the only one in the world who can confront the barbarian tribe's leader like this, right?" Hui Yan coldly snorted and said, "My father will no longer care about this sneak attack. However, we have already made an agreement. If you are unable to help me this time, then it is impossible for you to continue staying in the tribe." Lu Chen laughed, but his eyes revealed a trace of contempt. Then, he lightly said, "I have already told you, this battle is basically a sure win. But since I have agreed to help you make the Black Fire tribe strong, then there are some things that I have to do." "What is it?" Hui Yan asked. "Don't kill everyone like you did in the city." Lu Chen sighed, saying, "The number of barbarians in the north is already too little. If you want to achieve a faster result, then you naturally have to use some extreme methods. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.